Chapter 108. Caesar didn't think there was anything wrong with his answer. Anyway, the little guy's face immediately turned red. Then, with a burst of speed that was hard to reach, she ran away with a whoosh and disappeared without a trace. We're already so familiar with each other, yet she's still shy. The black dragon looked at the little black that disappeared. Its claws rubbed the stratum corneum on its chin and made a clicking sound. This wasn't a lie. Even though the black dragon's lair had been relocated and expanded, Luna still hadn't moved. She still lived with him and would often lie on his body to sleep. But now, she actually ran away. All right, then this steak is mine. I can't waste it after making it for so long, so fragrant. Now that it was about the green capital, it wasn't a question of whether to fight or not, but how to fight was the key. Caesar bit into the steak and thought. He just realized that he was too short on resources. These resources didn't refer to manpower or material resources, but human resources. It was funny that a dragon lord who ruled a monster clan, was actually worried about human resources like those humans. But this was the truth. Under his command, intelligent creatures like Hog, Nero, and Pavel were only suitable to be leaders and generals. They could complete their tasks meticulously, but they couldn't come up with groundbreaking ideas. Caesar now needed a character like Roy. Although they were mortal enemies, he still had a rather appreciative attitude toward the human's wisdom. He lacked such a person by his side who could give advice and provide reference. After all, Caesar's intelligence level was only SOSO. He knew that he was at the average level of the Penishade dragons. His real advantage was his extraordinary knowledge from another world, his thinking and ideas that surpassed the era. And in terms of the details of the game, the turning of war strategies, and the layout of development, Caesar really wasn't much better than those clan leaders. There were many blind spots in his knowledge, and there were many places where he couldn't do anything. Even if Caesar was really omniscient and omnipotent, if he did everything himself, he would probably die of exhaustion. Moreover, this guy was very lazy. The Penishade dragons were lazy and cruel, and this wasn't an exaggeration. He needed a helper, the strategic type. Was it possible to nurture Angramo? Caesar thought. The corpse dragons were highly intelligent and ambitious. They were more than happy to help with territorial expansion, military affairs, and internal affairs. Their loyalty was unquestionable, too. Thinking about it, it seemed feasible, but after some consideration, Caesar still didn't want to give up on this plan. To use Angramo, her identity could not be ignored. As an undead, the skeletal dragon's hatred for the living could not be erased. Although she was very obedient in front of Luna, that was only because of Caesar. If it was a creature that was not valued by the Black Dragon Lord, such as the Grey Horse clan, Yuga Angramo would not hesitate to use the most cruel and bloody means to deal with them. The Grey Horse clan seemed to be aware of this, so they stayed far away from the skeletal dragon and never appeared in places where she might appear. If Angramo was asked to give advice, she could only give the most extreme and cruel means. This would not work on the surface world of Iradia. Although Caesar was an evil dragon, he was not arrogant enough to be an enemy of the world. Angramo could take charge and rule the undead territory alone, but she could not set her sights on the entire force of the Black Dragon and could not plan the overall situation. Left, Caesar did not have any other suitable candidates. Even if the Manticore leader and the Wild Boar leader were very intelligent, they still did not have the ability to meet the Black Dragon's requirements in this aspect. Najindro might have the ability, but due to the fact that she was an undead like the skeletal dragon, she could not take care of the overall situation. Moreover, the Black Knight also had the problem of loyalty. Caesar even rejected Angramo, so he would not consider letting the Black Knight take over. In addition, there were many similar weaknesses in his camp. Therefore, he had to take down the green capital as soon as possible, encircle a piece of land in Iradia, and gather a group of highly intelligent creatures such as humans, elves, and dwarves. Then he would gradually fill in the gaps and make up for the shortcomings, creating a truly sustainable force. The significance of this war was too great, so it was imperative. Husky, go and invite the leader of the Gaul of the Stone Crow clan here. Thinking about this, Caesar ordered the battle lizard men outside the hall. Since the last time he saw the battle lizard men drooling and wagging their heads and tails when they met after the body transformation, the Black Dragon Lord gave them new names. Of course, these guys did not understand the special meaning of the new names. So after being given a new name by the true dragon, the battle lizard men were very happy and full of happiness. Although these dragon descendants with wrinkles all over their skin were rather ugly, they were still quite satisfying to serve a true dragon. They were 10,000 times more reliable than kobolds. After familiarizing themselves with them, the black dragon found it quite easy to use them. A few battle lizard men went to carry out the order without hesitation. "My apologies, my lord." After a short wait, Gaul arrived and explained, "After nightfall, the beastmen went to sleep, so we are a little late." After 5 years of bloody rule, the clans that still dared to call Caesar my lord were almost extinct. Under the suppression of the demon hounds and gnolls, most of them respectfully changed the way they addressed him to your majesty or my king to unify their words. The Stone Crow clan's beastmen were an exception, and Caesar did not want them to change the way they addressed him. "How's the handover going?" Caesar gestured for Gaul to sit down casually. He swallowed the fourth piece of steak that was huge for the beastmen, then licked his lips and licked his exposed teeth clean with his tongue. No one had calculated the Black Dragon Lord's current appetite, but they all knew that it was ridiculously huge. "It's done. The wild boar people can handle it themselves." Gaul said that the Stone Crow clan was now in charge of breeding. Logically, they should not have time and manpower to go to Iradia, but they said that they would participate in the upcoming Battle of Green Capital no matter what, even if they had to shed their last drop of blood. Caesar understood the beastmen's strong desire for revenge, so he arranged for the wild boar people to take over the breeding work. The research on the Berserker potion had come to an end, and Pavel had enough manpower. "I remember Orcash mentioned that you are very close with the Flying Ape clan in the Moss Canyon, and can even be allies with each other." Caesar began to cut to the chase. "What do you think? Can the Flying Ape clan be trusted?" Gaul did not answer directly, but explained the background. "Actually, we have not been in contact with the Flying Ape clan for a long time. It started when we started selling summergrass. Our people would station in the Moss Canyon for a while, and then we formed a relationship. However, the temperament of the Flying Apes is similar to that of the Beastmen, so the people in charge of transporting summergrass got along well with them. Occasionally, they would joke about the issue of forming an alliance, and their leader agreed. In fact, in the Second Age of Epic, the Flying Ape clan was a branch of the Beastman Empire, so they have some history with the Beastmen. As for whether or not the Flying Apes can be trusted, their habitat is Mostel. That's where the humans of the northern lands pass the United Nations. I don't know if they've been corrupted by humans, so I can't be sure." Garland then gave his own conclusion. "As for whether or not the Flying Apes can be trusted, their habitat is Mostel." This guy was much more talkative than before, and his mind had become more active. He had changed a lot. There was no other way. The old leader's save had fallen into eternal slumber, so Gaul had to shoulder this burden and grow for the clan. After stating the facts, Gaul could not help but ask, "Sir, you want to borrow the strength of the Flying Ape clan?" His idea was simple. Caesar had already unified the Underdark, and his power was enough. Even if he tied the Flying Ape clan to his war chariot, the power of the Black Dragon army would not increase by much. From the Beastman's point of view, there was no need to spend so much effort to rope in the Flying Ape clan. However, Caesar's idea was the complete opposite. In his eyes, the Flying Ape clan was not insignificant. Instead, they could affect the balance of the war to a certain extent, so it was necessary to win them over. Of course, he did not value the Flying Ape clan's power. No matter how strong they were, they would not be able to defeat the Devil Hounds. These monsters with half of the Inferno bloodline would definitely surprise the Green Dragon in the future. What Caesar was concerned about was the Flying Ape clan's channel. The Flying Apes had been rooted in Monster for many years. That canyon was a natural pass between the northern kingdoms and the Green Capital. As long as an army was equipped with a spellcaster and stationed at that place, it would be a conservative estimate for one to fight against 100 Green Capital. Such a strategic location, Yet the humans allowed the Flying Ape clan to occupy it. Not only did they not send troops to suppress them, but every passing caravan had to pay a certain amount of taxes to them. Caesar did not believe that the Flying Ape clan had subdued the humans. A single clan did not have such power. This meant that their relationship with the humans was not bad, but rather harmonious. Caesar wanted to use them to import weapons and armor from the northern kingdoms, as well as semi-magical weapons like the armor-piercing ballistae, and then rely on these things to deal with the green capital. His words sounded a little strange. Whether it was dragons or other non-human creatures, they all scoffed at human weapons. They refused to use tools, believing that weapons were useless concealments and armor was a cowardly shelter. In contrast, monsters prefer to use their claws and teeth to fight and kill. Of course, Caesar did not think this way. To him, obtaining victory was the most important thing, and reducing casualties was the second. This black dragon, who had no bottom line, would not have any discomfort. Benefits came first, and he would do anything. If it was possible, he would have liked to bring out a few magic annihilation cannons and blast the green capital a few times before the battle started. However, those cannons were nowhere to be seen in the north. They were all in the hands of the empire where the sun never sets. Chapter 109. His Majesty will lead us to the surface world and to our new home. This rumor had been circulating among the Black Dragon's kin for many days. This matter was first mentioned by the special clans and revealed by the Jackal-ants. Then the Black Dragon's personal guards, the Battle Lizard Men, also talked about it. Since it was mentioned by Caesar's core kin, the credibility was naturally quite high. Not long ago, the wild boar people began to enter the large clans and were responsible for counting the number of people and the recent status of the tribe. Some of the more sensitive, intelligent clans obviously smelled something different and couldn't help but imagine. Restlessness began to spread, and the monsters began to wait. And on the last day, the Black Dragon's order finally arrived. All the clans under the Black Dragon's rule in the Underdark had to bring more than 80% of their strong clans and be led by the new clan leader after the reform to gather in the Black Dragon's lair. This was a signal that there was no war in the Underdark, so even the most ignorant clans could realize that they might really be able to leave. The Black Dragon Lord would lead them to the surface world. The Black Dragon's order made the clans excited. The weather in the Underdark had not been very good these days. Thunderclouds gathered and scattered, lightning flashed, and cold wind rose and fell in waves. The already dark sky became even darker, and acid rain fell from time to time. It seemed that this was not a good time to go to war. However, Caesar couldn't wait any longer. After 5 years of recuperation, although his subordinates hadn't been forged into an iron plate, they had at least formed a certain level of fighting strength. They could fight against the Green Capital Army. If he wanted to go to the next level, it would probably take decades of reform and adjustment. Caesar did not have that time. He had waited long enough. He wanted to return. The bonfire was burning brightly, crackling and exploding. The beastman blew a heavy horn made of the horn of a steel bull and the tusk of an elephant. The sound it made was like the whisper of a giant dragon, guiding the monsters to gather. The Mount Wolves that were born and bred in the Underdark howled with their necks outstretched. Beside each of them stood a warrior of the Stone Crow clan. These Mount Wolves were originally given to the Beastmen to solve their weakness of being slow. Countless monster clans were pouring in. Nero led the demon hounds as he strolled past, looking around with his scarlet eyes. They were the strongest fighting force under High Lord Black Dragon's command. Their tyrannical bodies and claws were enough to make any creature tremble in fear. Now, they were shuttling between the various clans, in charge of maintaining order, resolving conflicts, and suppressing riots. It seems that the news is true. His Majesty is preparing to take us out of the Underdark. All the clans have come. The Manticore leader led its clansmen into the encampment. It looked around and realized that there were many monsters around. If it didn't use its wings to fly, it would be difficult to see the end of the encampment. This will be a powerful army, but there are also many cowards hidden within. Beside it, A manticore leader kept looking to the left and said in a low voice, "Ankegs, those guys are here too." Before the Black Dragon ruled the Underdark, Ankegs had always been the Manticore Lion's food. However, after Caesar changed the ecology of the Underdark, all his kin were not allowed to kill each other. They could only look for food in the hunting zone. It hadn't been long since this change, so the Manticore Lions still remembered and could even recall the tender and smooth texture of the Ankegs. In truth, the Dark Mantle Scorpion Lion clan was quite resentful. They believed that they were the first clan to pledge their allegiance to the Black Dragon Kaiser. Moreover, they were responsible for spreading the word of the Black Dragon and taking the first contribution. But in the end, they were not promoted to the ranks of the privileged clans. Instead, the Boar Men were first, and the Manticore Lions could only maintain the same status as the Ankegs. This made these intelligent and jealous fellows feel very unbalanced. It's only a matter of time before we become privileged clans. The Manticore leader glanced at his companions. He knew very well what his people were thinking. As the only clan under His Majesty that can use long-range attacks, as long as Manticore clan of the Dark Mantle, your position is over there. A boar man stood on the platform and shouted at the approaching Manticore lion, causing the Manticore leader to swallow his words. At the same time, he pointed in the direction of the Manticore lions. I really don't understand why His Majesty values these boar men so much. The Manticore lion continued to complain in a low voice. These scum, we only need 10 minutes to clean them all up. Not a single one will be left. Enough. The Manticore leader reprimanded in a low voice, a little angry. It seemed that if it wasn't for the fact that it was afraid of causing a commotion, he would have slapped the Manticore lion with his claws. If we really want to compare strength, do you think we are stronger than the Demon Hounds? The Demon Hounds are not part of the privileged clans. If you have the time to complain, why don't you help me study what His Majesty cares about the Boar Men? After the Dark Mantle Manticore Lion, many other clans arrived one after another. They were ordered to gather here, anxiously and uneasily waiting for Lord Black Dragon to appear. The Beastmen have been accounted for. Everything is ready, my king. A battle lizard man ran in to inform him. Caesar nodded. He had long since grown tired of staying in his nest, so he immediately climbed out of it. Actually, he didn't want to do this. From Caesar's perspective, deliberately arranging for his subordinates to wait for him for so long was simply asking for trouble. He had nothing better to do. His pride wasn't at the level where he needed to be satisfied with this kind of nonsense. However, this was Iradia. This was the Underdark. Here, whether it was humans or monsters, they all fell for this. As a true dragon, he had to maintain his dignity. He had to put on airs. He had to be arrogant and noble. These were Luna's words. He didn't know if they were true or not. Amidst the low sound of the horn, the black dragon slowly climbed out of the nest. The monsters slowly opened their mouths, and their knees involuntarily trembled. They raised their necks and looked at Lord Black Dragon, who they had to look up at a 90-degree angle. What kind of dragon was this? It had a sturdy body that was completely different from ordinary true dragons. It had huge wings that were completely different from others. Its entire body was densely covered in beautiful and shining crystal-like scales. Ferocious barbs decorated the scales. Even from far away, its red eyes could be seen clearly. It seemed to be glowing. The noisy gathering point quickly quieted down. Even though Lord Black Dragon hadn't made a sound, it still couldn't be ignored. The gazes of all the creatures involuntarily gathered on Caesar's body. It couldn't be helped. He could do whatever he wanted just because he looked scary. It was just a joke. In reality, when Caesar appeared, the pressure of his life force swept across the entire domain without restraint. All the monsters trembled together, and their bodies and souls had a momentary deviation. They were like little birds that had been targeted by a snake. The vast area suddenly became so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Chapter 110. It seems that the population of the clans hasn't decreased. On the contrary, it seems to have increased. Looking down at the monsters, Caesar muttered in his heart, So, when the demon hounds and gnolls forced the reform, they seemed to be quite gentle. This was the second time the Black Dragon Legion had gathered on such a large scale since the War of the North and South 5 years ago. Although Caesar did not have many soldiers, there were still close to 4,000 or 5,000 of them. It looked quite visually impactful, and the momentum was spectacular. Finally, it was barely worthy of the name Legion. Lord Black Dragon wanted to open the passage to the surface world. Of course, it was a big event in the entire Underdark. It might even be recorded in the history of the Underdark if someone in these native clans did this thing. Therefore, the undead also came to witness this historic moment. Caesar saw the Black Knight and the undead knights appear in his field of vision. The skeletal dragon landed some distance away from the Black Knight, and behind it was a group of gargoyles and liches. This made Caesar's eyes pause slightly, and he seemed to be thinking about something. The undead did not enter, but stood on the other side and watched. In addition, the tall gnoll leader hog was also there, followed by a few wolf pups. He stood together with the skeletal dragon Angramo and talked to each other. As a number one subordinate of the Black Dragon, Hog would definitely leave with Caesar. Therefore, many of the tasks that he was previously in charge of had to be transferred and handed over to the skeletal dragon. Now, some of the final handover work had to be done. Speaking of which, it was strange to see the gnolls and the undead standing together. As you all know, Caesar Ordoranzo came from the surface world. After looking around slowly, the Black Dragon spoke, and a hoarse and low voice squeezed out from his throat. At the same time, because of the entry of outsiders, the seal of the magic nodes has been forced to be lifted. I once promised you that I would lead you away. Caesar mentioned this past. When he had first gathered the various clans, in order to increase his chips, he had indeed made this promise. Now it's time. Upon hearing this, most of the monsters remained standing under the suppression of the draconic aura. There were also some highly intelligent species that could not help but whisper among themselves. But what I didn't tell you is that I still have opponents and enemies on the surface world. Caesar continued, "That was a green dragon, an old green dragon." As soon as these words were spoken, the whispers became even more intense and gradually spread, causing the entire assembly to become somewhat chaotic. In the eyes of the clan leaders, the great leader was only an adult black dragon. Although he was ferocious and more powerful than ordinary true dragons, he might be able to fight on par with adult true dragons. His opponent was an old dragon, an old true dragon with the strong physique of a dragon and outstanding magic attainments, could be ranked among the high-end forces in Iradia. He could even fight against some relatively weak legends. He was an extremely terrifying strategic killing weapon. No matter how strong the Black Dragon Lord was, if he were to fight against an old green dragon, he would probably still be suppressed or even die in battle. Of course, this was only the old and unupdated knowledge of the monsters. This came from the judgment of the abilities displayed by the Black Dragon during the war between the North and the South. Since the unification of the Underdark, no one had seen Caesar fully display his strength. Therefore, no one knew that this guy's body had actually grown to an extremely terrifying extent. After continuous optimization and adjustment, as a young dragon, Caesar's strength was so strong that he could even arm wrestle with an adult red dragon. At the same time, he had also obtained breath and superpowers. The values in the verification device were not much worse than the green dragons, and they were extremely effective against spellcasters. Have cowardice and fear swallowed you? Known as the most ferocious and cruel underground clan, the Black Dragon's low voice was full of deterrence, and the field quieted down again. I want you to know that I will twist off the green dragon's head, skin it, and hang it in the Black Dragon's lair as an ornament. First, he declared his strength and confidence. And I also want you to know, Caesar slowly stood up, his scarlet vertical eyes shining. I want you to fight for me, not to let your corpses be exposed in the wilderness and become food, but to let the pitiful worms of the green capital be exposed in the wilderness and become our food. So I ask you, warriors of the Underdark, to use the most ferocious means to deal with your enemies. Cruelty is our demonstration. I want you to open their stomachs and eat them alive, so that these enemies will understand our cruelty. I want you to tell those who are my enemies that there is something more terrifying than them. Let those ogres and wyverns fall into a nightmare, and let them imagine every day the torture they will suffer after falling into your hands. So, those guys will talk about us, those guys will hate us, those guys will fear us, and when they close their eyes, they will subconsciously feel an inexplicable fear for their enemies. And this fear comes from us. Caesar did not deliberately let out the low growls and roars of the dragon species, and kept a suppressed rhythm. Finally, he bared his teeth and asked, Is this what you want? For the Black Dragon Army, for the Underground Clan? However, unexpectedly, the first to roar was not the orcs or gnolls, but the demon dogs. After hearing this, these guys straightened their backs, and under the leadership of their leader, Nero, they all let out hoarse howls. Crush them, for the Black Dragon Army. After that, the roars of the orcs and gnolls could be heard. That's right. Even if Caesar became the Black Dragon, he still could not get rid of the emotional point of humans. In order to avoid a long period of awkwardness when no one responded to his declaration, he still arranged for the orcs and gnolls to be in charge of leading and guiding the emotions. In the end, there was a small interlude. The demon dogs were actually faster than their own supporters, and this caused the orcs and gnolls to be stunned for a second before they reacted. For the Black Dragon Army! For the Black Dragon Army! For the Black Dragon Army! Soon, the loud shouts were continuous, and the roars surged like a tsunami. Even if some of the clans were ignorant and slow, and their emotional point was different from other creatures, so they could not understand Caesar's motivation, they still roared with the leaders of the clans. Although they did not know the use of shouting like this, their strong desire to live told them that if they did not shout, they would definitely end up in a terrible state. Hollow out that mountain and open the passage connecting to the node. Amidst the earth-shattering roars, the Black Dragon nodded in satisfaction, then raised a claw, and pointed at the mountain opposite the nest. When the new nest was being rebuilt, Caesar directly chose the location opposite the node passage. Let's leave and go to Iradia. We were once trapped underground, but now we have broken free from the chains. Chapter 111. In the middle of the yellow desert, the ruins of the city were like an isolated island. It took the monsters half a day to crawl out of the Underdark, and when they reached the surface, the sky was already bright. The strong light that was different from the past instantly hit their eyes. The scorching sun radiated energy without restraint and shone on the earth. This made the monsters who were used to the dark underground whimper in pain. They could not help but close their eyes to avoid the strong light. Even Caesar took some time to get used to it. The climate in the north of Ilidia was always changing. It seemed that he had chosen the right time to return. It was now the rainy season. Bushes and thorny bushes covered the low slope of the ruins of the city. A row of jagged exposed rocks could be seen at the top, pointing to the sky in a dangerous manner. The Black Dragon rebuilt his temporary lair among the broken rubble, damaged buildings, and needle-like spires. He also ordered the clans, under his rule, to find a place to rest. War wasn't a game where one would charge in recklessly. As the Lord, Caesar had to do some preparatory work, and before that, his family had to be stationed in the ruins of the city for a short period of time. The air was filled with the smell of ashes. All the buildings and rocks in sight were burnt black. Burned bones were scattered on the ground. There were remnants of a camp. These were the traces that Caesar did not have when he first arrived. It seemed that after he left and entered the underground world, this abandoned city had welcomed new visitors. Those guys searched the ruins of the city, but the steel gate had long been hidden underground. They found nothing. After that, they lit a fire and left. Roy, Sylvia, Caesar whispered. Although the smell of ashes lingered for a long time, it seemed that the burnt things were very old and covered in dust. They did not look like traces left behind recently. Instead, they looked like product from many years ago. Not long after I left, Roy and Sylvia sent people to search this place. Caesar knew how smart and cautious his enemies were. Seeing that he had teleported and disappeared, Roy and the Green Dragon would definitely not give up. During that time, the enemies must have been searching for him relentlessly. The Black Dragon could even see the soldiers and monsters entering the abandoned city through the footprints and burn marks. He saw them carefully observing and searching for the specific scene of the abandoned city. Perhaps Caesar was not careful enough at that time. He left some traces here that were discovered by the enemies. The remnants of the camp told him that the enemies had been wandering around the abandoned city for a long time. Fortunately, the news of the Underdark came from the old wizard's save. That was probably the history of the Orc Empire. No matter how Sylvia and Roy were, they would not be related to the Orc Empire. They hunted me so anxiously, so urgently, for one reason only, because I frightened them. Yes, now is the time for them to be afraid. Now the Black Dragon has returned and is ready to take revenge. Caesar's first target was originally Roy. Everything started because of that human. He was the main culprit and initiator of Save's eternal slumber. Moreover, in Caesar's opinion, although the human did not have any power, he was more terrifying than the Green Dragon. Brains were scarier than force. Caesar originally wanted to deal with this hidden danger first, then deal with the Green Dragon. However, after a few days of careful thinking, he realized that it was not possible. If an evil dragon attacked Roy, the place called Khaki, it would not be easy. He would be resisted by all the countries in the north. It would not be a country, but an alliance. Humans were a group of creatures. They would not care about the reason for an attack, nor would they reason with an evil dragon. They would only cut you down first. Even when Sylvia won the War of the Green Capital, the humans still came and went as they pleased. They retreated back to the Mostel Canyon and left. Even the Green Dragon, who was at the peak of his power, did not pursue them, let alone attack the countries in the north. The Green Dragon did not dare. An old Green Dragon, the ruler of the Green Capital, did not dare. From this, one could see the power of the humans. The human alliance in the north. God knows what kind of power that war machine would unleash when it was fully activated. A direct battle would not work. Moreover, Caesar still had a lingering fear in his heart when he thought of the 1,000 soldiers who had entered the wilderness. Although these people were no longer a threat to him at present, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows at their fighting strength and loyalty. Moreover, he was secretly worried about them. Luna had said that no god would help their followers sign so many contracts of loyalty. It was impossible. There must be something else behind Roy and his forces, and that thing was something that even the current Black Dragon had no interest in finding out. It was wishful thinking to deal with Roy in a direct battle. At least, Caesar did not have that kind of power yet. To complete his revenge, he would have to use assassination, poison, and other methods. He would have to plan slowly and not succeed in a short time. Then what about dealing with the Green Dragon first? Yes, but it would be troublesome. It would have to be a quick battle. As a true dragon, Caesar could fight a long battle, but his kin could not. Attacking Green Capital from Therangobi would be a long battle line, and Caesar's resources came from the Underdark. His supply line was longer than expected. In such a situation, the Green Capital held a natural advantage. If they couldn't immediately destroy the enemy's effective resistance, Caesar could only end up like the Northland army in the past, falling into a quagmire of war and being dragged down by the enemy. Moreover, Roy and the Green Dragon were allies. If news of a war with Green Capital spread, Caesar would likely be attacked from behind. Being attacked from the front and the back was not a terrible result he wanted to deal with. This was the situation Caesar had to face if he wanted to complete his revenge. However, it was not as if Caesar did not have a way to resolve the situation that seemed to be ironclad and dependent on each other without any teeth. First was the lightning battle mentioned earlier. Caesar planned to use the Flying Ape tribe to import all kinds of equipment to defeat Green Capital as quickly as possible and take over their nest. As for Roy, he also had a way to deal with him. As long as he was trapped in the vortex and unable to extricate himself, it would be fine. Caesar had that human's weakness in his hands. Regardless of whether it was colluding with the Green Dragon or some devious tricks to force them to sign oaths, They were all secrets that could not be revealed to the public. However, Caesar had learned about all of these and gradually exposed them in the Wild War. This was also one of the reasons why Roy wanted to eliminate the Black Dragon so quickly. Once this news spread, whether it was true or not, Roy would attract the attention of the other countries in the northern lands. Caesar did not believe that at that time, the human would be able to find the time to help Green Capital. Caesar had already formed a complete plan in his mind. Husky, go find Hog, Gaul, and the leaders of the shapeshifters, the Black Dragon ordered from his hiding place in the sand. Chapter 112. Under the persimmon tree in the abandoned garden, Caesar was gnawing on the fruit while watching the fairies and butterflies chasing each other around the collapsed charwood. There used to be a tall, nameless plant that was taller than the tallest building in the ruins of the city, but it was burned down together with the grape trellis, leaving only the embers of the fire. It could be seen that the little fellow was in a good mood. Although she dissuaded him from returning to Iradia, when she really returned to the old place, Luna became happy. For her, Iradia was her home. Back here, the little fellow immediately put her worries behind her. Caesar understood how great the temptation of home was. In the first few years after he was born, he always couldn't help but think of the scene when he was on Earth. Those beloved relatives, and friends also made him toss and turn repeatedly and couldn't sleep at night. He knew that he couldn't go back. The persimmon that was as big as a human's fist was no different from a candy to the Black Dragon. Caesar picked it up with his tail claw and then threw it into his mouth. The battle lizard men served the mammon lizard egg and smoked meat, plus half a barrel of honey sweet wine. But the honey attracted flies, but the dragon might that rose from the Black Dragon immediately made them run away. "They're here, my king." The battle lizard men respectfully put down the snacks of the Black Dragon Lord and whispered. The mammon lizard egg was a giant oval egg with a length of half a meter and a short diameter of nearly 20 centimeters. It was even bigger than the red dragon egg. This thing was a little sour, but at the same time, it was quite sweet. It tasted very good, and it was a rare delicacy. But now, the eggs of the mammon lizard were used to breed new cubs. Only the Black Dragon Lord could taste it from time to time. Caesar put the whole mammon lizard egg into his mouth together with the eggshell, chewed it, and swallowed it. Then he raised his head and looked at the summoned people who had arrived. "My lord, your majesty," Gaul, Hog, and the shape-shifting monster leader saluted respectively. "I have something for you to do." Caesar did not beat around the bush. He simply could not imitate Iradia's way of speaking. "You will become the vanguard of the Black Dragon army." "My pleasure, your majesty." The shape-shifting leader bowed while Gaul and Hog listened in silence. Most of the members of this race were deformed. They had humanoid bodies, hind legs like gnolls, and claws like demon hounds. Their heads were the most distinctive feature. There were all kinds of strange heads. Some looked like snakes, some looked like rats, and most of them looked like insects and maggots. Although they looked ugly and disgusting, and their combat power was weak, the shape-shifting monster clan was one of the clans in the Underdark that had the closest thinking pattern to that of humans. Moreover, they were born with the ability to shape-shift and were excellent spies. Gaul. Caesar spoke one by one. "I remember that I mentioned something about the flying ape clan to you last time." "Indeed, my lord," the orc replied. "I want you to contact them. This place is not far from Monster. You can bring some people there and seek help from the Flying Ape clan. But remember, you must avoid mentioning my existence." The Flying Ape clan was a neutral creature and did not have a good impression of dragons. Therefore, Caesar specifically reminded him before continuing, "I need to use their channels to trade with humans and purchase necessities." "I will obey your orders, my lord." Gaul thumped his left chest to show his respect. "But, your majesty," Hog interrupted and reminded him carefully, "even if the leader of Gaul can complete the mission, it will be difficult to trade with humans without gold. What should we use to trade with humans?" "That's why I summoned you." Caesar turned his gaze to the knoll. Hog's thought process was quite rigorous. "Not bad. I still have a sum of money." It was the final payment from Roy after the summer grass trade. It was a lot of money, but Caesar did not have time to squander it before the war with the humans broke out. After that, the orcs moved their hiding place to Tulu Basin. The wealth was shelved and buried in the original habitat of the Stone Crow clan. Caesar guessed that Roy would probably turn Tulu Basin upside down after the war, but it was unlikely that he would go back and search for the abandoned habitat. After all, the greedy nature of dragons was well known. Roy would never have thought that the black dragon's treasure would be buried in that place. "I want you to go and take back what belongs to me," Caesar said, and then told Hogg the specific location and landmarks. "Just bring some men with you. Not too many, no more than 50. Be careful. There's nothing wrong with being careful. Please rest assured." Hogg nodded his head in agreement, his expression calm. In fact, he should not be so calm. It was common for dragons to be greedy and stingy. It was unusual for dragons to not be greedy and stingy. In this respect, they were no different from goblins. Caesar's action of taking out his own private stash to trade with humans was quite shocking by the standards of dragons. If it were anyone else, they would probably be amazed. However, Hogg had followed Caesar for so many years and was already used to the Black Dragon Lord's uniqueness, so he was not surprised. After giving instructions to his two top subordinates, the Black Dragon turned his head and looked at the strange, shape-shifting monster. Speaking of which, Caesar had ruled the Underdark for 5 years, but he had only seen this leader a few times. It almost did not exist in his memory. Shape-shifting monster. Looking at it, Caesar repeated silently and then asked, "I remember someone mentioned to me that you were born with the ability to shape-shift, right?" "That was the original leader of the clan, Your Majesty." The shape-shifting monster with the head of a dragonfly lowered its head and replied, "In addition, yes, Your Majesty. Every race knows it, except for the disabled. Every race knows it." "Well, can you speak human language?" Caesar snapped his fingers, and the sound of metal rubbing against metal was slightly harsh. "Well, it's the human language. It's best if you have a northern accent. Forgive me for being unable to do anything, Your Majesty." The shape-shifting monster leader was in a difficult position. It came from the Underdark and had never come into contact with the northern humans of Iradia. Naturally, it did not know what the indigenous language of those people was and what kind of accent they had. Fortunately, Caesar also knew that this was just an extravagant hope and did not force it. He nodded and said, "Then let's speak the common language. I want you to shape-shift into humans, pure humans, and then sneak into the northern countries in the south and go to a place called Kaki. With that as the center, spread rumors around." Caesar began to lay out the plan. "This should not be difficult for you." "It's not difficult, Your Majesty," the shape-shifting monster replied. "But how many races should we have? In case of accidents, take 100 people with you. But the rumors don't need to be spread so much. It will make people suspicious. Shapeshifters are a smart race. You know what to do with your race." Caesar stared at it and moved closer. "But you can't go. You have to stay here. If things fail, you will die, and all your races will die." This was the difference between the Black Dragon's special clans and the ordinary clans. The shape-shifting monster leader deeply felt this. Although the Great Lord was very easy to talk to before, and its voice was soft and comforting, whether it was the order given to the orcs or the gnolls, it did not give the orcs or the gnolls any requests, nor did it mention the price they would have to pay if they failed the mission. But when it was the shape-shifting monster's turn, it was a naked threat. The Black Dragon Lord did not hide its cruelty and ruthlessness. "I understand, Your Majesty," the shape-shifting monster leader replied worriedly. Caesar began to explain the method and the specific content of the rumors. After a while, he signaled that the shape-shifting monster could leave. "Go quickly. You told me before that there would be no difficulty. I hope you won't disappoint me." "Please rest assured," the shape-shifting monster imitated Hogg and said before leaving the abandoned garden. Chapter 113. Northern Human Alliance, Lion Duchy, Kaki's Borders. It was the rainy season, so the sky darkened very quickly. Not long after, the curtain of night had completely enveloped the city. The darkness was like a tidal wave, and only the stars in the sky could be seen. There were fewer and fewer people on the streets. Even if they were in the safe castles, the commoners had already gone to bed early. Whether it was the artisans, tailors, or merchants, they closed their doors after the last ray of sunlight disappeared. In this era, as long as they were not enslaved servants or slaves, they would not do anything after nightfall. Generally, they would have to wait until dawn the next day. Even if it was urgent, they would have to knock on the door, and it had to be someone they knew. That was because the northern kingdoms were not as developed and efficient. Other than the liege's mansion, there were no soldiers patrolling the streets at night. When night fell, the city would become a paradise for kidnappers and thieves. Every few days, there would be a corpse with a completely unrecognizable face in the sewage river in the city. There were black shadows moving through the streets, avoiding the vigilant and hostile eyes of the people. They were like fishermen spreading the bait. Every once in a while, they would carefully throw down a piece of paper. On it was written in the tone of an ordinary night squire, and there was an extraordinary story recorded. It was not only Kaki's Lordstown, but the other towns and even the other territories of Lion Duchy had the same scene. My name is Brian Crowley, Squire of a Knight. I serve the Brindle family of the Lion Duchy in the Northern Kingdoms. When someone sees these words, I think I am already dead. My master is Roy Brindle, the second son of Count Brindle. He is in charge of the Brindle family's wine, silk, mills, and other businesses. But things are not as simple as they seem. When Duke Ryan led his army to fight against the evil dragon and the northern kingdoms against the Green Capital, I found out that my master, Roy, was secretly supporting the Green Capital. His Brindle family provided the mother of poison with countless resources and information. That year, the reason why the commander of the Northern Allied armies was assassinated was because of Count Brindle's manipulation. As Lord Roy's attendant, I have personally witnessed Count Brindle, Lord Roy, and the dragon's debauchery. In fact, there were many attendants and soldiers who knew about this matter. This made me wonder why the Brindle family dared to be so brazen. Were they not afraid of Grand Duke Lionheart's punishment? It was only later that I understood that the Brindle family not only had dealings with the dragon, but also with the devil. The Count used the powerful devil to force us to sign a contract of loyalty. If he didn't submit, he would die. I escaped. But I knew that I would not be able to escape the Brindle family's pursuit and persecution. So while I was fleeing, I wrote down everything I knew and gave it to a reliable friend to keep it safe for me. I told him that when he could no longer contact me, he would reveal the truth of this secret. I wasn't a noble knight, but I still hoped that this trip would allow my soul to travel to the kingdom of God. I am willing to swear an oath to the true God of mercy, whom I believe in, Brian Chloe. If this thing was written in the common language, it would take a long time. Therefore, Caesar did not let the shapeshifters rely on the parchment to spread it. Instead, he asked them to find a way to get their hands on thick paper produced by the northern kingdoms and copy it down before spreading it. Considering the limitations of this era, even the humans who dominated the continent did not have many innate talents like the shapeshifters. There were not many who could read and write. In order to prevent the effect from not meeting his expectations, Caesar could only cast a wide net to catch the fish. This was the best method he could think of to spread the rumor. But at the beginning, the results were not as good as expected. This rumor did not cause much of a stir. It was now the third era, 1633. It had been 7 years since the Battle of the Green Capital. It had been a long time, and the people were not interested in the matters of that time. As for the devils, they were not to be trifled with, and the people kept their mouths shut. The real cause of the rumor came from a fragment in the letter. It was the adulterous affair between the Brindle's father and the Green Dragon. The people of the lower class did not care who the Brindle's family was secretly supporting or which devils they were dealing with. They were only interested in the gossip of the important people, and even made up many colorful stories to spread through word of mouth. This was the reason why the rumor spread to the ears of the upper-class nobles. This was also something that Caesar did not expect. After the uproar, the investigation of Brian Crowley began immediately. What was unexpected was that the investigators in the Brindle family's army found that there was indeed such a person with the exact same surname as Brian Crowley. And that person did indeed disappear without a trace after the Battle of the Green Capital. This news and evidence attracted the attention of the ruler of the Lion Duchy, Duke Police Leon. After a short period of consideration, the Duke immediately sent out an executive to investigate the Brindle's family in Khaki. Before this, the Brindle's family would never be subjected to such an investigation. Count Brindle belonged to the radical faction in the Lion Duchy, and he was also an important noble at the border. He was responsible for the defense of the entire Lion Duchy, and his family had pledged their lives to the Lion Duchy several times. This kind of loyal and resolute subjective image caused Duke Leon to not pay attention to the Brindle's family. Even when there was news of spies in the northern kingdoms, the ruler subconsciously excluded Khaki and unconditionally believed in the Brindle's family's loyalty. So even in such a serious war, the Brindle's family secretly supported the Green Capital's actions were not discovered by anyone. But now, the investigation had caused problems. Even though the Brindle's family had been doing their best to eliminate the effects of draining the pond to catch all the fish, there were still too many clues that were exposed. The missing caravans, the deceived mercenaries, even though they were now buried, they still used silent methods to accuse the Brindle's family of evil deeds. The real evidence came from Khaki's army. No matter how they interrogated the soldiers, they could not get any information about the Brindle's family. Once the soldiers showed signs of leaking information, they would immediately turn into a pool of thick water, and their souls would be destroyed. There was nothing more direct than this to prove everything. Duke Leon was furious and immediately ordered to detain the Brindle's family for interrogation. But Roy and his father were one step faster. Khaki directly started a war. The Brindle's family wanted to use Khaki's power to fight against the Lion Duchy and even the entire Northern Alliance. Everyone thought that they were crazy, but the progress of the war was unexpected. The Brindle soldiers were as swift and fierce as wolves, and as strong as lions. In just a short week, they destroyed 3 territories and hung the heads of the 3 nobles who supported Duke Leon on the city walls. Chapter 114. It's the Black Dragon. It's back. Unlike the true dragons and fairies, mortals were unable to withstand the passage of time. 7 years had passed, and the young noble was now nearing 30. His long and narrow eyebrows and neatly trimmed beard made Roy look more mature, and his figure was no longer thin. He was now wearing casual clothes with a ribbon tied to his button. He walked into the Count's study with a solemn expression. "Father." The nobleman, who was no longer young, bowed slightly. "After the great victory, I think we should focus on its problem and guard against the true dragon's attack." The Brindle family had swept through the 3 territories adjacent to Khaki with lightning speed and hanged 3 of Lionheart's supporters. However, they did not intend to expand the war immediately. Instead, they slowed down and chose to digest the benefits before moving on to the next step of the plan. "Is it your intuition again this time?" Brindle held the pipe in his right hand and looked up through the smoke. His dark eyes and thick eyebrows formed a strange contrast with his short white hair. "It's my intuition, Father." Roy found an armchair facing the window and sat down. "I've investigated it, and it's not a rumor. It's a premeditated poison sword. No one will dig up the past, unless it's our enemy. The Brindle family has many enemies, but not many know the details of Khaki." Roy took a sip of tea. "Brian Crowley is one of my men, but he died 7 years ago and disappeared in the Battle of the Wilderness. It's only now that there's a letter with his tone. This must be a forgery. There's only one possibility. Our enemy from that time has returned." Roy concluded. "Sylvia is really disappointing." The old Count showed a sarcastic smile. "The powerful mother of poison? I didn't think that even a black dragon could not be completely dealt with, and even gave a chance to make a comeback." "Father, Lion Kingdom isn't giving us much pressure. The Northland Alliance hasn't reacted yet," Roy continued. The Northland Alliance was a machine that was too large and had too many parts. This resulted in slow transmission and slow reactions. Thus, until now, this war had been a civil war in Lion Kingdom. The Northland Alliance had yet to intervene. Under this premise, Roy proposed please allow me to lead half of the soldiers back to the border of khaki and guard the rear for you in case of any sudden attack. To tell the truth, Roy was very afraid of the Black Dragon. The memory was still fresh in his mind. The Battle of the Wilderness had caused the Count's second son, who had been advancing triumphantly, to taste the taste of defeat. In that battle, he had originally held the absolute advantage, but his opponent had managed to grab hold of his weakness time and time again, turning the situation around. Even when he used his final trump card, the appearance of the green dragon Sylvia, his opponent still managed to escape. The Black Dragon was completely different from the lazy and stupid Pinochet dragons who only knew how to use brute force. And when it returns, it will definitely bring with it a violent storm. Roy had to admit that he was afraid and worried. This time was different from the past. They were in the open while the enemy was in the dark. He did not even know how strong the Black Dragon was and how many forces it had under its control. But the pair of eyes in the dark were staring at them, waiting for an opportunity to devour them. Now, the enemy had only played a small trick, spreading a rumor without much effort, and it had already caused Brendel's family to be in a terrible state. They were even forced to launch a rebellion in advance. God knows what kind of storm the Black Dragon would bring when it really attacked. Roy had no choice but to prepare in advance. He had to be cautious and eager to return to the border of khaki in case the Black Dragon could attack at any time. He did not know the enemy's strength or where they were. Defense was the only thing he could do so far. Do you know why you failed that time? My child. The old Count sighed softly and put down his pipe. You are very smart. You're used to taking everything into consideration and advancing step by step. This is very good, but you are too young and your vision is too shallow. You can't see the essence of things clearly. The reason you want to go back to defend khaki is because the Black Dragon might attack. But have you ever thought about why it would attack? Will it attack? You told me yourself that it is a unique dragon, not a reckless fool like the Red Dragon. The old Count looked at him. What reason do you think it has to attack us? At this time? Why? Roy was a little confused. After hesitating for a while, he probed, because we are weak now, and our army is focused on the battle against Lion Duchy. We do not have the strength to turn around. It can easily defeat us and complete its revenge. It was obvious. Roy did not know why his father still asked him this question. It seems that you still don't understand. The old Count shook his head and explained, to satisfy its insignificant desire for revenge? That's too naive. What good would it do it to attack us at this time? To an evil dragon, we are the same as the other humans in the northern kingdoms. We are all its enemies. Isn't it happy to see the enemy fall into internal strife? If the Black Dragon attacks at this time and exterminates Brendel's family, want to be driven out of the northern kingdoms by the others in the end? What would it get? The actions of any intelligent creature are driven by a motive, and this motive is mostly profit. The old Count concluded, in Iradia, the so-called justice and evil, glory and revenge are all laughable lies used to fool the lower class. We only care about profit. In the past, in the Second Age, the proud Valkyrie of the empire on which the sun never sets was willing to be beaten by those ugly giant leaders for 4 days and 4 nights in order to get the help of the giants. What can make a legend submit? Isn't it for the benefit of the empire on which the sun never sets? The old Count sneered and said, let the humans fight among themselves and use others to suppress our strength. Or jump out now and make itself an external conflict, making the humans unite to fight against it. What do you think the Black Dragon will choose? So, Father. Roy Brendel's face reddened slightly. He hadn't been lectured like this for a long time. What do you think we should do now? Just inform the Green Dragon. The old Count stood up. We don't need to care about the border defense. Maintain the status quo and swallow the Lion Kingdom as soon as possible. In the old Count's guess, the Black Dragon didn't use assassination or other methods of revenge. Instead, it spread rumors. It seemed that it just wanted the Brindle family to be trapped in a quagmire and unable to react to the changes in the outside world. In that case, the other party's first target was the Green Capital. In fact, The old count was already disappointed with the green dragon. Of course, he wouldn't be so kind as to remind Sylvia. He just wanted her to fight the black dragon to the death. It would be best if she could kill the black dragon. Even if she couldn't stop it, it would be best to delay it as much as possible. With this time, the Brindle family could defeat Grand Duke Lionheart and take control of the Lion Kingdom. Then, they could think of ways to win over the other countries and stabilize the situation. Chapter 115. Brindle's guess was right. Caesar did intend to take care of the green capital first and was ready to carry it out. Ever since he returned to Iradia, the Black Dragon's luck seemed to have changed. Originally, Caesar was still worried about what to do if the orcs could not get the support of the flying apes, but unexpectedly, things went smoothly in Gaul. The flying apes in the Mostel Canyon readily agreed to the orcs' request. On the other side, Hog successfully dug out the treasure from the Stone Crow clan's abandoned dwelling and returned the gold that originally belonged to Caesar back to him. Trade with the humans could not be delayed. After the Battle of the Green Capital, in order to make up for the country's financial losses, the northern kingdoms released their control of military equipment, so a large number of standard weapons flowed into the civilian population. As long as one had the money, they could even buy some enchanted items on the market, one grade lower than magical items, and they were official goods that were recognized by the various kingdoms. So through the Flying Apes channels, the Black Dragon could still buy those things. Driven by profit, the efficiency of the merchants could be said to be the highest in Iradia. Caesar could immediately see results when he threw in a sum of money. However, the Black Dragon was not about to hand over his wealth so easily. Between the northern kingdoms and the monster Grand Canyon was the Therengobi. Coincidentally, that was where he was staying right now. Thus, Caesar intercepted the caravans on the way without paying a single cent. He robbed the caravans without hesitation. In order not to scare them out of their wits, the Black Dragon did not appear in person and only sent his kin. Moreover, Caesar's men were very particular. Every time, they were sent by different clans and were only slightly stronger than the guards of the caravans. After the other party surrendered, they did not harm the lives of the merchants. This way, with the Flying Apes' reputation as a guarantee and the temptation to buy at a high price, the merchants would take a second risk to try to make up for their losses. Then, Caesar could repeat the same trick and rob the people of their goods. He would just let the family members pretend that they did not know and leave some of the merchants' food and water, giving these people a chance to walk out of the Gobi alive. The same scene played out 4 times. After exchanging information, the merchants finally reacted and understood that there were powerful bandits in Therengobi. They immediately raised a strong protest and demanded that the Flying Ape Clan compensate for the loss of the merchants and send the Flying Ape Clan to help protect the goods. Of course, the Flying Ape tribe wouldn't give them any compensation. Those bandits were Manticore's battle lizardmen and other such races. They had nothing to do with the Flying Ape tribe, and there was no possibility of them working together. This was what the merchant had seen with his own eyes. However, considering the needs of the orcs, the Flying Ape tribe still agreed to the merchant's request for assistance. Since then, Caesar had let go. He had already cheated the Flying Ape tribe, and he didn't want to cross the line in the future. He stopped plundering and had the orcs pay the merchants the gold. However, the trade didn't last long. Soon, a civil war broke out in the Lion Kingdom of the Northland Alliance. This made the other countries vigilant. They took back the military equipment circulating in the market and strictly prohibited the export. Although those things could still be found in the black market, the price had increased by more than 10 times. It was no longer something that Caesar could afford. However, the things he had on hand were enough. Caesar bought some standard equipment to equip the gnolls, battle lizardmen, and other races that were similar in size to humans. If he wanted to equip the hounds, manticores, and even the orcs, he would need to make custom-made equipment. Caesar didn't have the time or money to do so. After the armor and some simple weapons were in place, Caesar ordered his family members to start moving. He requested that before the soldiers went to war, the food must be in place first. Therefore, Caesar sent the orcs to the wilderness closest to the green capital. They would transport the resources from the Underdark and his family members to that place in batches. However, he took this too seriously. Caesar still retained a lot of human thinking and ignored the special characteristics of the clans under his command. Once the war broke out, the clans could devour the dead monsters and enemies. They produced and sold their own food, so there would be no shortage of food. This included himself. As the Black Dragon, his furnace-like stomach could digest everything he swallowed. Caesar only realized this after being reminded by the Knoll Hog. However, he did it. This was good. God knows what would happen after the war. Even he couldn't predict the sudden situation. It was better to be safe than sorry. In order to carry out the blitzkrieg to the end, Caesar thought about it again and again. In the end, he still summoned the undead. He wasn't reckless, but he wasn't a fool who didn't use his power. The combat strength of the high undead was still not to be underestimated. Thus, Nijindro led his army of undead knights to the surface. It took them a long time to go around a Mostel gorge and enter the wilderness. Anger mode didn't come. Although Caesar's daughter was very passionate about war, he still forbade her from appearing on the surface. It was fine if the undead knights were seen by others, but the skeleton dragon couldn't be revealed to the public for the time being. Before Caesar became strong, it could only be kept underground. On the other hand, Sylvia, as the ruler of the Green Capital, also received the news from the Brindle family. That black dragon bastard is back. The green dragon Sylvia sat on her emerald throne with her legs crossed. She was still wearing the black dress embroidered with rose flowers. There was no change at all, but there was now a tourmaline crown on her black braided hair. As a highly intelligent creature, the true dragons had their own preferences. Some true dragons like to stay in their dragon form and boast about their might, while others like to turn into human form for convenience and fit the mainstream aesthetic. The mother of poison belonged to the latter. So soon, Sylvia took a bite of an apple and muttered to herself. It didn't make sense. Logically speaking, it would take at least a few hundred years for the black dragon to make a comeback. How long has it been? Only 7 years. 7 years was not even enough time for a true dragon to sleep. Even its mother, Nessitoria, hadn't come back yet. How did that little bastard come back first? Could it be that that guy had found Nesartoria and brought his parents with him? Sylvia felt that it was possible. Otherwise, it couldn't be explained. It wasn't as if the black dragon hadn't seen her and the green capital's power. Why would it dare to come back? Even if it was stupid, it wouldn't be to this extent. However, that little bastard's power was enough to pose a threat to its mother. It wasn't a young dragon, so why would Nessitoria bring it along? Could it be many things had happened in the history of the dragons? Sylvia smiled mischievously. It seemed that it hadn't realized the seriousness of the matter. Other than that, she really couldn't think of anything else that would give the little bastard the confidence to come back. A god's chosen? Stop fooling around. Her Majesty Tiamat wouldn't pay attention to the Penishade dragons below the ancient dragon level. Even she, the powerful mother of poison, had not won the Dragon Queen's smile. Chapter 116. After leaving the Mostel Canyon, the Black Dragon's army headed north. They didn't light any fires, and the entire army moved forward in the darkness. Occasionally, the army would meander through the mountain streams, and when they looked up into the darkness, they would see the tip of a redwood tree. If it weren't for the stars, it would be difficult to tell the direction in such an environment. However, Caesar's army could. They were from the Underdark, and every one of them had night vision. Every one of them. Unlike the logistics that had arrived at the wilderness earlier, this was the main force of the Black Dragon's army, the true main fighting force. Beastmen, battle lizardmen, gnolls, manticores, devil hounds, ankheggs, and gray horses were all mixed in. Nero, one of the clan leaders, listened to the sound of the wind. Devil hounds had better hearing than dragons, and Caesar could only hear the wind rustling through the trees, but the devil hounds could discern more information from it. Of course, there was nothing at the moment. Their vanguard had already scouted the area, and the forest was as quiet as a cemetery. Not even the sounds of birds, beasts, or insects could be heard. It seemed that they were either scared away or hiding in the cave, shivering. Caesar thought. However, there was nothing wrong with being careful. Thus, he had already released the manticores and had them patrol the northwest at a low altitude, keeping an eye on any foreign creatures that might appear. At the same time, the gray horses followed the army's route back. The army safely arrived at the wilderness. Caesar arranged for them to rest for a while, then immediately sent out the battle lizard men to extend their tentacles into the borders of the green capital. About half an hour later, news came back one after another. The battle lizard men in charge of infiltrating the wilderness were tense, and their stench ability was on the verge of bursting out. They had obviously been under great pressure. What they saw was not the green capital's rainforest, but a heavily guarded fortress. Caesar could even imagine the scene from the battle lizardman's description. Countless ogres were stationed outside the green capital's royal palace. Bonfires were lit, and savage thorned beasts were marching about, forming one blockade after another. Hanging from the majestic canopies of the ancient trees were a dense swarm of bloodbats and wyverns, roaring as they patrolled the area. This was different from what Caesar had expected. It had been 7 years since the green capital's last baptism of war. Even the most elite soldiers would have relaxed after so many years, not to mention these lazy and greedy monsters. There was no reason for them to maintain such a high level of vigilance. This was neither logical nor common sense. Unless it was an order from their master, the mother of poisons, Sylvia. The green dragon was on guard. Did she know that the enemy would appear? His presence was exposed. The layers of relationships made Caesar subconsciously point the finger at Roy. He did not leave any traces on the merchant's side, so there would not be any problems at that link. And his own kin had never even seen a green dragon, so it was even more impossible for him to betray him. The problem could only lie in that rumor. Caesar hid in the dark mantle. The first time he made a move, the enemy guessed his identity and informed Sylvia so that the green capital would be on guard. How powerful! Caesar felt a headache coming on. It was troublesome to have such an opponent. He found that he had no way of smoothly ambushing the green capital. Even his blitzkrieg plan was likely to be ruined. Please forgive us for our incompetence, my king. The leader of the battle lizard men said to Caesar. Ogres had strong bodies and strong vitality. Unless they were killed in one hit to the head, the battle lizard men would be strangled to death after being exposed. However, most of the ogres in the green capital had 2 heads. The thorn beasts were covered in bone armor and had astonishing defense. As for the bloodbats and wyverns, they had no place to attack. The battle lizard men were of little use in this battle. We swear on our lives that no one will be able to discover our whereabouts. These were the words of the gray centaur and the manticore. Compared to the manticore, the gray centaur was more nervous. He had been tortured by the black dragon's bloody rain. Master, I promise you that we have checked dozens of times. Have you counted their numbers? What is the size of the green capital's army? Caesar didn't blame them. He knew that the problem didn't lie with the gray centaur and the manticore. He continued to ask. From what we saw, the ogres have 11 campfires. Each campsite has at least 30 ogres. The thorn beasts have 3 large tribes scattered around the green capital's fortress. They're separated by swamps. There are about 500 of them. Wyverns are rare. They are high-level dragons. We only saw a dozen of them. The bloodbats are countless. This was the report of the battle lizardmen. Their true strength should be 3 times that of this number, but not more than us. Caesar said in a low voice. That's right, your majesty. The leader of Enol's hog came forward, and I think they're missing something. Caesar was a dictator, but he would never ignore the wisdom of others. This caused his subordinates to have the opportunity to make suggestions to the Black Dragon Lord. This would never happen under the rule of the other Penishade dragons. What do they lack? Caesar asked. Patience. The monsters of the Green Capital were not well-trained soldiers, so they couldn't maintain a high level of vigilance for long periods of time. Of course, Caesar's clan couldn't do the same. This was the weakness of using monster clans as a fighting force. Then we will wait for 2 days. Caesar didn't have to worry about being discovered by the green capital. He had brought the earthworms with him. They could build an underground camp on the spot, and it wouldn't be a problem for them to accommodate an entire army. Moreover, the clans came from the Underdark, so they had no qualms about going underground. Caesar, you can't fight the green dragon here. At this time, Luna, who had been staring at the rainforest for a long time, suddenly said, "The rainforest is the green dragon's home ground. Here, its ability to animate plants will be maximized. Among the true dragons, there was an extremely unique innate ability that would awaken in adulthood. It was one of the most powerful spellcasting abilities in a true dragon's life, and it would grow as its magic power grew. For example, the red dragon's burning domain, the blue dragon's thunder abyss prison, the black dragon's carrion worm swarm, and the green dragon's plant animation. White dragon. Of course, the white dragon has one. It's just that it's too mysterious, so no one has seen it and no one knows. It was a terrifying ability that could give life to plants. It was an indiscriminate effective spell that could make all plants within a certain range come to life and fight for the green dragon. In a place with lush vegetation, this ability was extremely terrifying. The rainforest was the home ground of the green dragon. This was also the reason why Sylvia had moved from afar when the forest had turned into a desert. She had forcibly occupied the Black Dragon Lady's lair, even if she had to start a feud. That place was like a fish in water to her. "It's fine, just burn it," Caesar said calmly. This was the simplest and most direct method. Before the battle began, they would burn everything. Without the plants, Sylvia wouldn't be able to control them. Chapter 117. Set it on fire? Luna's eyes widened. "Caesar, didn't you want to take over this place? If you set it on fire, the forest will become a barren land again." The green capital's rainforest had a good ecology and was rich in resources and vegetation. However, flames were unreasonable. Once ignited and not suppressed, there would be nothing left here. If they used this method to fight this battle, even if the Black Dragon defeated the green capital, he would have to find a way to rebuild it if he wanted to take root here. Of course, Luna's words were more or less selfish. After all, as a long-lived species and an intelligent creature, she must have her own independent thoughts. Nature could not be taken away. The forest fairies loved the rich rainforest. If they could live in a warm and pleasant environment, they would not stay in the dry and hot wilderness. In fact, even in a place like the Underdark, Luna would feel uncomfortable. She just kept it to herself and did not tell Caesar. "It's okay. So what if it burns?" As it grew bigger, Caesar could no longer touch the little guy's head. Its claws had become very large and very sharp. The sharp claws at the front were half the size of Luna's. It was easy to get into trouble if he was not careful. Touching its head was a pleasure. He had to find a way to solve it. You underestimate the power of Mother Earth. As long as the climate is fine, the rainforest will be restored to its original state in 100 years. For us long-lived species, this is not a long time, is it? And in the future, maybe we can use our spellcasting ability to speed up the reconstruction. Caesar comforted the little guy. There was nothing to discuss about this problem. In order to deal with the green dragon's innate ability, he had already decided to do this. However, Luna's words did remind him that this place was the green dragon's home ground. The other side was prepared. If there was a surprise attack, Sylvia would have the absolute advantage. However, this advantage was only one aspect. From another perspective, Caesar could also turn green capital's advantage into a disadvantage. He decided not to launch a surprise attack and canceled the lightning strategy. Under the circumstances where the green army was prepared, a direct confrontation would cause immeasurable losses. He did not want to lose all the soldiers he had won with his face in the Underdark in this war. The original plan was for Caesar to send people to the northern kingdoms to spread rumors, then wait for the rumors to spread and attract the attention of Brendel's family in Khaki. In that case, the Brendel family would not dare to openly provide aid to the green capital. Thus, Caesar could make use of this time to launch a blitzkrieg war. He could not care less about losses and losses. First, he would take down green capital and become the king of the mountain. In the end, the development of the situation was unexpected. What he did not expect was that Roy's family was so ruthless that they directly started a war in Lion Country. From then on, they were deeply involved in the quagmire and no longer had the power to extricate themselves. In that case, considering the actual situation, the Black Dragon had a better choice. Roy's family was stalled, and Green Capital was isolated and helpless. Caesar did not have to worry about the possibility of being attacked from both sides. Many of the restrictions were no longer there, and he could turn the lightning strategy into a less costly guerrilla warfare in the jungle. The Green Capital wasn't a narrow location. Instead, with the Green Dragon Palace as the center, it was a group of forces that stretched out for dozens of miles. Countless tribes like ogres and thorn beasts lived within it, all of them loyal to the mother of poisons. The other party's numbers were not fewer than his. And this situation made Caesar know that under the Green Dragon, there must be a logistics deployment like the Wild Boar Men, responsible for production and maintaining supplies. Otherwise, Green Capital had not fought outside for a long time. With so many monster groups, it would have been impossible to maintain for 7 years. They would have killed and devoured each other long ago. Although he didn't know what the other party's logistics department was, whether it was kobolds or troglodytes, gnomes or goblins, it did not stop them from becoming Caesar's primary targets. Since they were providing logistics, they had to have the means of production. Green Capital needed its own production base, whether it was for planting or breeding. But the proud Green Dragon would not let those things get in her way, so she would not place the production base near her palace. On the contrary, she would place it in the center of Green Capital. If Sylvia did not pay enough attention to it, it might even appear on the edge of Green Capital. In comparison, it would be easier to find. At this moment, Sylvia had received news of the Black Dragon's attack. She had increased her vigilance, gathered her forces, and gathered her army to surround and protect the palace. In this way, her control over the surrounding areas would become less sensitive, sluggish, and weak. Caesar planned to avoid large-scale battles as much as possible. He planned to use guerrilla warfare to harass, burn down Green Capital's fields, and plunder all the property. He would press in step by step from the outside, locking the other party within the Emerald Palace. Green Capital's forces seemed like an iron bucket, but he wanted to see how Sylvia would react in a situation where all sides were on fire. But Your Majesty, after listening to Caesar's plan, the Manticore chief raised an objection. If the Green Capital's army takes the initiative to attack while we're divided, how should we deal with it? They could devour us one by one. The Manticore chief's question represented the doubts of most of the clan leaders. Remember my words, avoid fighting with the enemy's main forces. The essence of guerrilla warfare is fast, short, and ruthless. I want you to nibble away at the enemy's forces one by one. After reminding the Manticore chief, Caesar ordered, the Black Dragon's army will be divided into 4. So, I want you to build 4 underground camps like this. They must be sufficiently hidden so that my soldiers can avoid the enemy's search at critical moments. Can you do it? This is a piece of cake for the Ankhegs, my master. The leader of the Ankhegs said in admiration. The Ankhegs did indeed look like giant yellow insects. They had 6 slender legs with sharp claws at the end. Their small heads had powerful jaws that could easily snap trees and gnaw through rocks. They relied on their legs and jaws to dig the ground. Digging was their innate ability, and this was where the name Ankhegs came from. Yes, Nero. The Black Dragon then turned to the demon dogs. I want you to leave behind a smart and vigilant demon dog in each unit. I will choose one for you, my king. The demon dog chief nodded. Your clan members have amazing hearing and can rely on howls to transmit information. However, I will only allow you to do so in critical situations, such as when the Green Dragon appears. Caesar comforted his subordinates. If the Green Dragon appears, I will rush over as soon as I receive the news. In fact, Caesar couldn't wait for Sylvia to leave the Emerald Palace and take the initiative to attack his branch forces. If she dares to appear, I will wring her head off. Chapter 118. The dragon's thoughts were unconstrained and full of creativity. So Sylvia's Emerald Palace was not built on solid ground like ordinary palaces and castles. It was a real castle in the air, lying in the air. More than 10 towering trees grew again under the green dragon's magic, reaching a majestic state. Their treetops were close to each other, intertwining with each other, twisting together with magic, forming the most solid base of the Emerald Palace. This was a treetop fortress, the highest point in the entire green capital. Sylvia only needed to sit on the throne to overlook the whole situation, seeing every mountain, every river, every field, and every jungle. The wyverns flapped their wings and landed. This group had another name, pterodactyls. They were probably the dragon descendants with the closest appearance to the true dragon besides the dragon beasts. However, the fighting ability of these guys did not match their appearance, so they could not win the championship among the dragon descendants. They could not even be ranked in the middle. The true dragon had created countless races in Iradia's millions of years, and there were countless powerful dragon descendants. The wyverns folded their wings and let the middle joint of their wings rest on the ground. They walked forward on the ground, passing through a wide passage that could accommodate 20 people side by side. If one did not know that the owner of this place was an evil dragon, people might think that this place was a fairy tale castle, full of a beautiful aura, in line with all the fantasies people had of wonderful fairy tales. The whole palace was carved out of expensive crystal, and on both sides of the passage, there were gilded tassels decorations, and the ground was inlaid with shining pearls. When they entered the hall, they could see a large number of jadeite and glass sculptures. Moreover, the true dragon liked shiny things, so the hall was densely covered with colorful gems, so dazzling that people could not open their eyes. Sylvia's wealth was obvious. The green dragon had always had the highest requirements for the standard of the chromatic dragon's nest. They had a unique aesthetic, and they were extremely extravagant in terms of comfort and enjoyment. The boarder is being harassed. This is the third time today, my master. The two-footed flying dragon did not look at the woman on the throne. It lowered its head and said, "The enemies are attacking from all directions. Our area of activity is shrinking." It had just killed a gray centaur, and its teeth were still stained with dirty blood and minced meat. Its master did not like to see those things in her palace. Little black bastard, Sylvia leaned against the emerald throne lazily and rested her chin on one hand. Ambush, harassment, guerrilla warfare. Are you that unconfident? She wasn't angry at all about the twin-legged flying dragon's battle report. Instead, she was a little proud and felt that she had the upper hand. The fact that the other party didn't dare to fight her head-on meant that he didn't have the strength to face her head-on. He could only rely on these small skirmishes to annoy the great mother of poisons. Just like a child who couldn't get candy, crying noisily, childish and stupid. Sylvia thought, but why haven't you shown yourself yet? What are you waiting for? The mother of poisons changed her sitting position. Since the first attack, the battle had been going on for a week. Every day, the green capital would be attacked from all directions. The fields and forests were burned, and resources and food were plundered. But the other party didn't have it easy either. Although every time, before the reinforcements from the green capital arrived, the enemy would have already retreated. But her fierce and valiant servants weren't just for show. They were all clans left behind from the green capital's battlefield. They would also bite off a piece of flesh from the attackers. So every time, the other party would leave behind a large number of corpses. The green dragon, who had a strong base and backup forces, didn't feel that it was a loss. Orcs, gnolls, hounds, manticores, gray centaurs. The identification of the corpses allowed Sylvia to roughly understand the composition of the enemy forces. And the existence of the orcs and gnolls allowed her to confirm that it was indeed the black dragon that had escaped. But a little troublesome was that she couldn't pinpoint the exact location of the other party. After so many days of searching, the wyverns and bloodbats still couldn't find the base of the black dragon's forces. God knows where they came from. It was as if they had drilled out of the ground. What kind of result did this lead to? Even now, the Green Capital Army couldn't find the other party and crush them in one go. In this regard, Sylvia felt that fighting the Red Dragon was simpler and more straightforward. If they didn't accept it, they could just fight. There was nothing to talk about. You guys are really bad. Don't you know how to set up a trap? Or they could hide in the dark and follow those monsters until they reach their nest. Sylvia clicked her tongue and commented, "You guys are too disappointing. We are useless. Please forgive us, Master." The wyverns continued to lower their heads. The lizard face, hidden in the shadows, bared its teeth. "Didn't you say that this was just a small fight and that you should play with them first? Well, in the end, the results weren't good, and you said that your own people were useless." "All right, I knew that you fools weren't smart enough." Sylvia pursed her lips. It seemed that they had forgotten her previous orders. She said again, "Inform all the clans to gather their subordinates. Don't send them to their deaths alone. Also, use a large force to clear this area and take back the land that is out of control." She was already tired of this game. One order after another was issued. The Green Capital, this huge beast, began to move its muscles. Also, give the ogres a mission. The ogre tribe was the main army that Sylvia relied on the most at the moment. Have them set up traps and give themselves a way to lure the enemy to attack. Then, chase them to the end until they kill the enemy or find their nest. I don't believe that the little black dragon can really dig a hole in the ground. Sylvia mumbled and laid out this plan. She was not at all afraid that the ogre chief would encounter any mishaps. That three-headed ogre was quite powerful and was her most powerful kin, her right-hand man. Even if it faced that black cub, the ogre chief would not be at a disadvantage. After all, that black dragon was only powerful in its special elemental resistance. It could be seen that 7 years was really a short time for dragons. The green dragon did not think that the black cub could be any different from before. She did not even think in that direction. She fell into a blind spot. Her judgment of Caesar was still from 7 years ago and had not been updated. Of course, before she saw Caesar, she could not update it. "I understand, Master. Please don't worry." The wyverns bared their teeth and retreated. Because of the green dragon Sylvia's playful attitude, these subordinates were very sullen. They had been restraining themselves and did not fight with the enemy. They took the initiative to find an opportunity to attack. Chapter 119. His master had told him to act like it, so the ogre chief left his clan and left the Emerald Palace with only 50 warriors. Like the patrolling bats, he began to walk out. He had a name, Duoga, given by the green dragon. Although they had 3 heads, the ogres were still low-level creatures. They weren't like the 9-headed lizards, which had independent thoughts in each head. Their heads were only there to ensure that they could continue fighting after one of their heads was chopped off. Therefore, ogres only had one thought, and their intelligence was not high. It was the same for Duoga. The long night made the rainforest dark and damp. This made Duoga very uncomfortable. To be honest, the ogre chief was quite happy when the enemies attacked. At least they brought fire. Fires were not allowed in the Green Capital, so Duoga had to listen to his master. The ogre chief had only taken a few steps when he felt a slight chill. This made him realize that he was being watched. He was not far from the Emerald Palace. Who knew how the enemies had discovered him so quickly? However, the ogre chief continued to walk forward. He did not care. Instead, he was filled with excitement and eagerness. Come, let's give Duoga another dinner." However, the expected attack did not appear. Duoga realized that the feeling of being watched, which gave him goosebumps, quickly disappeared after a while. The enemy had retreated. "Damn it, cowards!" Duoga's 3 heads opened their mouths at the same time and cursed. He was afraid that the enemy would be scared away and would not attack again. If that happened, tonight's mission would be ruined and his dinner would be gone. "Chief, it looks like the enemy is too weak. Once we fight, we can quickly crush their camp." The ogre next to Duoga said. He was a weak little fellow with only 1 head. His face was ashen, and his hands were wet and limp. His attitude was extremely flattering. He even added, "Just like how you crushed the human camp." We all know. The other ogres agreed. "I don't know. I only care about my dinner. Duoga turned his head and said in a low, muffled voice, "Also, don't talk like those annoying thorn beasts." Before he could finish, he suddenly felt that the air around him was not right. He raised the mace in his hand and swung it in the direction of his intuition. Pu. The sound of two weapons piercing into flesh rang out almost at the same time. Duoga's mace smashed into the chest of a battle lizard man who had hidden himself. That area was now completely caved in, and the ambusher was instantly killed. At the same time, the flattering ogre from before had its head cut off by the ghostly short blade. It only had one head, so it died instantly. The chieftain didn't care about his dead comrade. Instead, he took 2 steps forward and grabbed the corpse of the sneak attacker with one hand. The size of a battle lizard man was no different from a small pony to an ogre. Duoga tore the lizard man in half with both hands, then bit off all 3 heads at the same time. Only then did he call out in a muffled voice, "Food!" Their food had arrived. After the first person died, the ogres quickly reacted. Most of the followers Duoga had brought with him this time were 2-headed ogres, all of them elites of the tribe. They immediately began their counterattack. If Caesar was here, he would be able to determine the combat ability of these ogres. But now that the black dragon was not here, the tribe could only use other methods to deduce. After being discovered, the 5 battle lizard men were no match for a 2-headed ogre in a head-on battle, let alone a 3-headed ogre. This kind of loss was not worth it, so the battle lizard men quickly retreated, emitting an unpleasant stench as they ran away. "Chase! Ugh!" Duoga roared, but he immediately swallowed the words back into his stomach. He could only endure the dizziness caused by the stench and chased with large strides. When he left the area, he shouted, "Carry out the master's mission." Unfortunately, the battle lizard men ran away very quickly, and they had the ability to hide themselves. At this time, they were already far away. "Useless weaklings," the ogre chieftain growled, persistently chasing after them. At this moment, the low howls of wolves suddenly sounded in the rainforest. Accompanied by the rustling of the forest, pairs of red eyes appeared in front of Duoga. Green-skinned orcs. The ogres became alert and moved closer to each other. There was nothing to say. The orcs were not a race that was willing to waste time talking, and the ogres were the same. Thus, when the 2 sides met, the ogres immediately raised their maces and flail, while the orcs urged their mounts to leap forward and attack at the same time. When the target orcs reached the predetermined distance, Duoga suddenly stepped forward, raised his maces with one hand, and smashed them down on the head of the Mount Wolf. The enormous Mount Wolf from the Underdark, known to have an iron skull and bronze bones, had its head smashed open at this moment. When it died, it turned into a headless corpse, its blood splattering all over the ogres. In order not to follow in the footsteps of the Mount Wolf, the orcs could only temporarily abandon their dead mounts and roll to the side to open up the distance, then get up and regroup. More and more orcs rushed in. However, even the powerful orcs were no match for the 2-headed ogre in a 1-on-1 or even 2-on-1. Even the leader Gaul was gradually being suppressed by the ogre chieftain. Unfortunately, this wasn't a fair fight to begin with. Whoosh whoosh. As the air crackled, a few ogres were pierced through by thorns. An ugly figure appeared in the distance. The shadow chimera lion flapped its wings, pressuring the ogre chieftain from a distance. The battle lizard men in charge of keeping watch had immediately notified the army after discovering this unusual ogre. Thus, this was a joint operation of many clans. Damn it, if Duoga had not realized the problem by now, he would not be stupid, but retarded. Fortunately, the ogre chieftain was not that stupid. This was a trap, and he had been set up. Kicking away Gaul, Duoga retreated with the ogres and roared, "Let's go break out of the encirclement." The ogres did not have the habit of fighting to the death. However, as if deliberately not letting him do as he wished, shadows appeared on the path that Duoga had to take to retreat. The jackalen and gray centaur blocked his path. Hog was here too. "Useless weaklings, Duoga will crush you all." The ogre chieftain roared angrily. Anger brought impulsiveness and power. He began to lead the ogres to break out of the encirclement. But he could not. Gaul, Hog, Manticore, Grey Centaur, and the other leaders were not weak. Although the ogre chieftain was stronger than any one of them, breaking out of the encirclement was a pipe dream when they worked together. Soon, one of Duoga's arms was torn off by the jackalen, and one of his heads was also slashed. But this guy was really a bit of a monster. Even under such circumstances, Duoga still managed to injure the jackalen leader, leaving a large wound on Hog's abdomen. But that was the end of it, because at this time the leader of the demon hounds had also arrived. As the strongest leader of the Black Dragon army, the ogre chieftain's combat ability was not much stronger than Nero's, even at his peak. Thus, when the demon hounds arrived, the encirclement ended. Soon, the ogre chieftain's arms were torn off, and 2 of his 3 heads were twisted off. He had completely lost the ability to fight. Even so, this big guy was still thinking of ways to continue attacking. He endured the pain and pounced forward, opening his mouth to tear Hog apart. Duoga's strategy was to suppress Hog and cripple the jackalen while surrounded by enemies. This was a principle that ogres had learned in group fights when they were young. However, the other side's leaders were numerous and powerful, so Duoga did not succeed. Since he had failed to succeed, the ogre chieftain, who had lost his fighting ability, was even less of a threat. Hog only needed to shift to the side to avoid the bite, and then his short, heavy axe slashed into the ogre's abdomen, causing its large body to fall heavily to the ground. The ogre chieftain was still growling on the ground. His arms were gone, and his abdomen was heavily injured. Blood flowed freely, and only one of his heads was still alive. However, he did not beg for mercy or surrender. Master, Duoga growled. Right now, he only wanted to send a message to Sylvia. The enemy's forces were not weak. In fact, they were very strong. They had been careless. Master? Indeed, you will be the best spoil of war I can offer to Master. The demon hounds walked over and placed their thick front claws on the ogre chieftain's last head, then crushed it. Chapter 120. Dong, 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 the drumming annoyed her. From the clan camp at the bottom of the Emerald Palace, the cries of the thorn beasts, the cries of the twin-legged flying dragons, and the trembling of the blood bats could be heard at the same time. However, the most annoying thing was the furious howls of the ogres. The chaotic noise echoed in the Emerald Palace, causing Sylvia to frown. Were these bastards pigs? No lord could stand such a terrible and terrible clamor. I want to make these fellows swallow, cow down one by one. Sylvia thought angrily and summoned the wyverns. Master, as a high-level dragon descendant, the wyverns were the only creatures allowed to enter the Crystal Palace. Other than that, the other dependents were all rejected. The green dragon hated those sloppy fellows dirtying her palace. Even a most powerful ogre chieftain couldn't enter. Sylvia would usually only meet him in the treetop fortress. The wyverns were Sylvia's personal guards and also her mouthpiece. What's going on? You and those fellows below. Are you tired of living and want to rebel against me? Sylvia asked angrily, her long and narrow eyebrows raised. Don't be fooled by her voluptuous, elegant, and dignified appearance of a noble lady. Every chromatic dragon's rule was extremely bloody and cruel. The green dragon was no exception. When she wasn't happy, she would easily skin and hang some of her dependents. We have no intention of awakening the mother of poison's anger, Master. The wyverns stared at their reflections on the ground and smacked their lips. They weren't too nervous or afraid. After all, they had been by her side for so long and already understood her temperament. But there is indeed bad news coming from below. Speak. I hope the thing you brought can save you from torture. The mother of poison stared at them fiercely. The ogre chieftain is dead. The twin-legged flying dragon's words were straightforward. After hearing this, Sylvia's expression calmed down. She raised her eyebrows, but no emotion could be seen on her face. She wasn't in a hurry to deny it. Instead, she shifted her gaze away from the wyverns and slowly stood up from the throne, walking to the side. Tracking. The name was vulgar, but the effect was extraordinary. This was the most basic effect spell, and it was also one of the 3 precious techniques. Its application was extremely broad, and any spellcaster had to master it. Soon, Sylvia knew the result. I got it. Leave now and order those guys to keep quiet. Sylvia still maintained that non-committal expression as she waved her hand to dismiss the wyverns. Her tone was flat, but the slight trembling in her dark green pupils showed that her heart wasn't completely unperturbed. Duo Ga had died just like that. Although the news of the ogre chieftain's death did not enrage the green dragon immediately. No matter how hot-tempered the Pinochet dragons were, they would learn to control their temper in old age. However, he was after all her most capable dependent, and Sylvia was somewhat distressed. She did feel sorry for him. Duoga had contributed a lot to her. All right, little black bastard, you really want to start a war with me? Sylvia muttered to herself, minding her own business as she walked into the depths of the palace. She chanted an incantation and opened her treasure vault, which she regarded as priceless, and dug out a magic item that had been sealed for a long time. This was a treasure that was close to the legendary level. It originated from the Green Dragon's harvest after defeating the Northern Allied army. Even in the vast collection of items in her treasure vault, this item's value was one of the highest. Magic item, Staff of Void. Sylvia scrutinized her treasure, her eyes shining with an infatuated light. Other than being able to increase spellcasting ability, this staff had a powerful additional attribute, and that was also the reason why it was comparable to a legendary item. Through its enhancement, the spells cast by the user would be able to penetrate the resistance of elemental resistance to a certain extent. Although its effect was powerful, this magic item's current applicability was worrying. After all, in Iradia's territory, it was difficult to find a creature with strong elemental resistance. Without an opponent, the existence of the Staff of Void had lost its meaning, and its glory had been covered in dust for a long time. But now it could be put to great use. Sylvia deactivated the transformation spell and revealed her true form. Then she opened her mouth and stuffed the magic item called the Staff of Void into her throat bit by bit and swallowed it into her stomach. Unlike humans who could use it immediately, for a true dragon, it was actually quite troublesome to borrow the power of a magic item. They needed to swallow the magic item that they wanted to use into their stomach. Then, the true dragon had to rely on their elemental blood to resonate with their body. After that, the power of the magic item would be attached to the true dragon's body, and it would take effect at any time. It sounded quite good. It would take effect at any time, and it would not be a hindrance. However, a true dragon could only do this with one magic item at a time. If they wanted to use another magic item, they would have to vomit out the original item from their stomach and swallow a new magic item. This also meant that for a true dragon, even if they had endless treasures and countless magic items in their collection, they could only use one magic item at a time. As for the others, they could only stare at them. In this way, it seemed that the humanoid race had a wider range of adaptability. In Iradia, humanoid races, especially humans, were the ones who were truly favored by the gods. After stuffing the Staff of Void into her mouth, Sylvia paused for a moment. She waited for her body to resonate with the magic item, and after successfully producing a reaction, she left the treasury and used a spell to lock the treasury again. Come, face me. After transforming into her dragon form, Sylvia's voice had become low and hoarse. I will let you live, but I will kill all the lackeys who serve you and let you taste the taste of pain again. Era hid in the shadows of the trees and watched the monsters rush out of the camp of the Emerald Palace. He was the leader of the Battle Lizardmen and was responsible for the monitoring of this area. However, he did not expect to see such a scene as soon as he replaced his kin. Like a flood of wild beasts, all the sounds in the forest were drowned out by the thunderous footsteps. Twin-legged flying dragons, bloodbats, and thorny beasts were screaming nonstop. One after another, they pushed each other out of the camp. The ogres, the most important army of the Green Capital, also rushed out with weapons in their hands. The spiked clubs with sharp points and heavy iron were enough to break bones and tear armor. The Green Capital Army moved out in full force. Not far away, a true dragon roared. Compared to the noise of the army and the movement of the rushing river, the sound was not strong, but it made the battle lizard men feel a layer of goosebumps on their skin. They could not help but feel their legs go soft, and they almost collapsed to the ground. "Hurry, go," informed the Lord. The husky turned around and wanted to give orders to the other tribes, but a wave of indiscriminate attacks descended. Huge bone spurs covered the sky like a torrential downpour. Because they were too nervous, they accidentally exposed their position and were discovered by the surging Green Capital Army. They were directly beaten into sieves and lost their lives. Sylvia constructed a spell and used her powerful magic to cast the Eye of Truth. Ignoring the obstruction of the forest and river, she directly locked onto the location of one of the Black Dragon's branch forces. She already knew the location. Destroy them. A huge green dragon more than 20 meters long spread its wings and soared in the sky. The dragon's roar was endless. Chapter 121. The Black Dragon was hidden in the damp, dark underground. This place did not belong to any of the three branches, but was instead an independent underground lair located at the center of the connecting points between the various camps. This way, Caesar could guard against the mother of poison's sudden attacks. After receiving the Demon Hound's message, he could quickly reinforce the branch army. Every day, he would summon a clan leader, using this opportunity to understand the situation and discuss strategy. He took turns to summon each clan leader, not showing any personal preference. Whether it was a privileged clan like the Beastmen or a marginalized clan like the Grey Centaurs, they all had the opportunity to express their thoughts to Lord Black Dragon. Even the Boar Men and Ankhegs in charge of logistics had the opportunity to discuss strategy. Caesar knew that he was not smart. He needed the opinions and suggestions of these clans. Although most of them were not effective, they might provide him with some ideas and open up a new structure. At the same time, he did need to meet these commanders to understand the deployment of the various branches. Then, based on the actual situation, he would slowly adjust the distribution of forces. It was a little raw, but Caesar was working hard to learn how to be a qualified lord. Indeed, although he was much stronger, he still could not break away from the little Black Dragon in many aspects. There was still much to learn. However, he had to take it step by step. Ever since the operation against the Green Capital began, there had not been any large-scale battles, but small-scale battles had occurred. Every day, his clan would encounter the Green Capital's army. Perhaps the Black Dragon subordinates would ambush the Green Capital scouts, or perhaps the Green Capital's minions would ambush the Black Dragon subordinates. Both sides had victories and defeats, and they fought endlessly. However, Caesar did not make a move from beginning to end, quietly observing the changes. Without seeing the Green Dragon, he would not make a move. Sylvia might know who her enemy was, but she would never guess what the Black Dragon of the past had become or how powerful he had become. This was his greatest advantage, so Caesar had to wait until the Green Dragon appeared before showing himself. Then, he would take advantage of the Green Dragon's misjudgment of his strength to crush the Green Dragon's throat. He only had one chance. The Green Dragon was not an idiotic target. She was an old dragon, an old Pinochet dragon who had experienced countless battles. She had both strength and rationality. Caesar guessed that the Green Dragon would probably run away at all costs if it encountered a fatal threat. Even the silly and overconfident Red Dragon knew the principle of running away if he couldn't win, let alone the Green Dragon. Caesar had a strong physique and great strength, but he was no match for the Green Dragon, who knew how to use magic. Once the Green Dragon escaped, it would be difficult for him to catch up. There was one more thing that should not be forgotten. The old Green Dragon's energy assessment was higher than Caesar's, but he just happened to have the means to suppress the other party. Therefore, Caesar did not plan to fight back and forth with the Green Dragon. If he waited until the other party figured out his strength, he might still be suppressed. In this situation, Caesar's strategy was to fight to the end once he showed himself. He would use his command ability well and do his best to defeat the green dragon in one go. This was the reason why Caesar, as the black dragon overlord, had never taken the lead and charged forward with an irresistible force. Moreover, in a situation where the lords of both sides did not show themselves, the black dragon's side already had a considerable advantage. There was no need for him to personally take action. At this stage, the monster clans, under the tactical guidance of the multi-angle harassment and hunting, were constantly reducing the control of the green capital, forcing the other party to give up most of their territory. After receiving the black dragon's instructions, these guys from the Underdark did their favorite evil things. They burned the fields dry, poisoned the wells, destroyed the mineral veins, plundered the livestock. They did everything they could. As long as something in the green capital fell into their hands, they would first destroy it. At the same time, these guys also caused unprecedented damage to the rainforest environment, which made the little girl's heart ache when she found out. By the time Sylvia reacted, changed her strategy, and gathered her forces to recover the lost territory, all that was left was broken walls and ruins. At that time, when the Mother of Poison found out about this, she felt her teeth ache. This result was not a small loss for her, but it was still acceptable. However, in the many years of war with the other Pinochet dragons, Sylvia had never seen a true dragon do this. The true dragon's greed and stinginess were unparalleled in the world. No matter the size, they were used to treating the things in their hands as their own. They did not care if they needed it or if they could protect it. They just kept it well. Therefore, in a war between true dragons, the fixed assets that were seized by the enemy would generally be preserved very well. How could it be destroyed? That's its own thing, now it's mine. The little black cub's brain was wired differently. Sylvia clicked her tongue in wonder. Even at that time, she still regarded the black dragon as an ignorant child. Until something else happened. The clan leaders worked together and killed the ogre Duoga, then wrapped his body and brought it back to their king. This was an unexpected surprise. Caesar had seen this three-headed ogre on the ground before. The gnolls had sewn Duoga's arms and head back together. He had seen it 7 years ago. It was this guy who had led the ogres out of the void portal in the wilderness. Caesar remembered it very clearly. This guy might be the leader of the ogre tribe, and this was later confirmed by the battle lizardmen who were in charge of the surveillance mission. What kind of position did an ogre leader have in the green capital? After these days of fighting, Caesar understood that in the composition of Sylvia's forces, the wyverns were the personal guards, the bloodbats were the scouts, the thorny beasts were the long-range troops, the cavemen were in charge of logistics, and the ogre tribe was the real main force under the Green Dragon's command. Caesar was overjoyed. He hadn't even mobilized the special operations team, the Undead Knights, but his kin had already beheaded the ogre leader and presented his corpse to him. He didn't know who was the one who had commanded the joint hunt at the last minute. Their performance was good, and they were decisive and achieved remarkable results. These little guys were quite capable. However, after a short moment of joy, Caesar quickly realized that the green dragon might not be able to sit still. Sylvia definitely wouldn't be indifferent to the death of an important kin. She might very well take action. If he was the green dragon, he would definitely use his spell-casting ability to search for a place to hide, find the enemy's camp, and then launch a bloody revenge. Magic was troublesome in the end, and belonged to the category of unreasonable. Caesar guessed that the underground camp built by the Ankhegs might not be able to hide from the Green Dragon's search. Thus, he changed his strategy from offense to defense. He ordered the battle lizardmen to keep a close eye on the Green Capital's movements while withdrawing a large number of troops from the underground camps and gathering them in his underground lair. He only left some bait, waiting for the Green Dragon to attack, and then complete the encirclement. Of course, if the Green Dragon was lucky enough, it might directly find the underground lair. That would be just what Caesar wanted, and the two of them could fight head-on. Chapter 122. They really are hiding in the underground cave. The green dragon with matte emerald scales hovered in the sky. Magic light splashed as she flapped her wings. She relied on magic to float in the air and use her wings to control her body and adjust her direction. Sylvia angrily shook her head. The Eye of Truth told her that one of the little black cub's lackeys was hiding below, holed up in the narrow underground cave. They had cut down and burned all the plants in the area. They used the charred stumps and broken branches to cover the entrance of the cave, blocking the spying eyes and ears and avoiding the search of the scouts. They were like cowardly gophers. Find all the entrances. Guard them. The green dragon roared in the dome and then descended. No one could withstand the fury of the great mother of poison. This time, she had personally led an army to encircle and annihilate them. Even that little black cub had to suffer torment after being captured. No one could escape. No one. These cowardly and incompetent lowly creatures. The two-footed flying dragon followed beside her. Looking at the ogres and thorn beasts blocking all the entrances, its voice was a bit like the cry of crow. Master, they have been scared out of their wits by your name. They don't even have the courage to pick up their weapons and resist. Let's charge in and crush these bastards. The ogre tribe clamored. Their chief had died in battle, and their anger had drowned their tiny brains. However, Sylvia did not give the order to immediately charge into the enemy's formation. Although the green dragon was proud and confident, she was not a fool. Through the Eye of Truth, she could see that the narrow tunnel was full of traps. Every corner was guarded by monsters. In such a complicated environment, the advantage of numbers would be greatly weakened. Moreover, she didn't know who made this cave, but its structure was so exquisite and stable that she couldn't help but praise it. There were layers upon layers inside, and each of them was independent yet connected to each other. It wouldn't be easy to completely destroy this place. If her cavemen could do this, they would not have to hang out with pigs, dogs, horses, sheep, and cows all day long. However, in the face of such a fortification, Sylvia was not helpless. The only ones who could not do anything were the white dragon with fat brains. The white dragon cubs living in the Great Glacier were angry and anxious about the snow worms hiding in the cave. They could only use their heads to block the entrance of the cave and stick out their tongues to lick it. This became a joke among the Penishade dragons. To a spellcaster, it was easy to solve this problem, not to mention that she was a powerful and intelligent green dragon. Sylvia approached and stared at the narrow entrance for a moment. Then she opened her mouth and spat dragon breath. Clouds and mist surrounded the green dragon's mouth. In Iradia, the green dragon was ranked as one of the most poisonous creatures. The main reason was their lethal breath. In Iradia, as long as one breathed in the poisonous gas, it would quickly take effect, starting from the respiratory tract and causing the entire body to fester from the inside out. Even if the creature held their breath and refused to breathe in the gas, the poisonous gas would still seep into their pores and any other places that could be invaded. In Iradia, only energy bodies and some special silicon-based creatures could completely ignore this poisonous gas. The majestic poisonous breath surged out. It did not matter if it did not come out. She wanted to fill the underground camp with poisonous gas and let those inferior species die in pain and torture. They will scratch their faces, the green dragon thought viciously. Soon, endless howls rang out from the underground cave. The sound was like a dog's bark, but also a little like a wolf's howl. It was very penetrating and extremely ear-piercing. One could probably hear it clearly even from miles away. Sylvia originally hated this kind of noise, but this time she smiled. She turned her head and smiled at the wyvern leader beside her. Listen, these painful cries and howls of despair. How pleasant. They should feel honored and thank you for your favor. They have the honor of singing songs for the great mother of poisons. The wyvern leader complimented. Sylvia did not reply. She continued to stare at the entrance of the tunnel, but her chin was nodding lightly. She was clearly enjoying the compliments and was very satisfied with them. It was worth mentioning that these black dragon lackeys had shockingly strong vitality. They could actually hold out for so long under the poisonous breath of the mother of poisons. Who knew where that black cub had found these fellows? However, they all died one after another in the end. Sylvia's Eye of Truth could no longer see any signs of life below. "Let's go." The green dragon looked away, no longer paying attention to the entrance. He gently flapped his wings. "I want to crush these underground caves one by one." At the same time, a light breeze blew past. The skies seemed to darken all of a sudden. Large dark clouds surged on the other side, and then came roaring like a tide. At the same time, there was a faint rumbling of thunder in the distance. But how could the thunder come from the ground? "Alert!" The green dragon sensed the abnormality and ordered her troops in a low voice. There was no need for her command. The wyverns flapped their wings and took to the air. The sanguine bats scattered in all directions. The thorn beasts retreated to the back of the formation, and the ogre tribes moved forward with their weapons in the direction of the sound. The gentle breeze turned into a hurricane. That wasn't the sound of thunder, but the sound of rolling thunder. Countless troops appeared on the horizon. They were shuttling through the forest, tearing apart vegetation and collapsing rocks. They were rapidly approaching the green capital core amidst a continuous stream of roars. The Demonkin dogs were at the forefront of the vanguard. They were the fastest and most agile hunters, but they were also the fiercest monsters of slaughter. They bared their fangs and charged out amidst the forest. Following closely behind were the gray centaurs and orcs. Their speed was very fast, but unlike the gray centaurs, the orcs who had wolves as their mounts had become fully armed heavy cavalry. As they moved, their armor and weapons clashed with each other, making a dull sound. They were very aggressive. Behind them were the endless horde of gnolls, shadow manticores, and battle lizardmen. What gave you the courage to bare your fangs at a great true dragon? Sylvia's eyes narrowed. She raised her neck and let out a sharp dragon's roar that pierced the eardrums of every creature. The surging dragon aura that belonged only to the old green dragon rose and spread out in all directions. In Iradia, in theory, an army with thousands of men and horses did indeed have the ability to easily kill an old dragon or even an ancient dragon. However, the prerequisite was that they could resolve the issue of dragon aura. Otherwise, who knew if even half of the so-called thousands of men and horses would be able to reach the true dragon? The green dragon slowly floated into the air, narrowing her eyes as she looked down at the charging monsters. Needless to say, just the vast dragon aura rising from her body was enough to suppress most of the weak gnolls and lizardmen until their legs turned to jelly. They didn't even dare to move. They couldn't even move a single step. Sylvia sneered at this scene. She couldn't understand how the enemy planned to fight against her green capital core under the might of the old true dragon. Roar! It was at this moment that a deep dragon's roar rang out, and flames ignited on the horizon. Chapter 123. I was once trapped underground, but now I've broken free of my chains. It was a pitch-black shadow that flashed with a metallic luster. Like a volcanic eruption, it shot out from behind the group of monsters and cut through the dark clouds on the other side of the sky. It swept past the figure that was running wildly below at an extremely fast speed and was rapidly magnified in their field of vision. The first thing that came into view were the enormous wings that could not be ignored. Its wings were larger and wider than the old green dragon's. Although they were thin, they were densely covered with tumor-like joints and crisscrossing bones. They were rugged and protruding for support, full of a ferocious aura. As the distance quickly shortened, Sylvia was able to catch a glimpse of its full appearance. It was a ferocious true dragon that was completely different from the Penishade dragons and the metal dragons. It had a stronger and more muscular body than the red dragon, a more attractive head and chin than the blue dragon, sharper teeth than the green dragon, and harder and shinier scales than the black dragon. The most distinctive feature was its thick and strong neck, which made Sylvia's gaze pause for a moment. In the true dragon's aesthetic, when choosing a mate, the focus was on the other party's fangs, neck, and scales. Among them, the shiny scales were the main attraction, which was a symbol of wealth. The slender neck was second, which could enhance the emotional experience during mating. The thick and long fangs were the last, which represented strength. However, although the other party had a thick neck that was the opposite of the dragon's aesthetic, the green dragon did not think that it was ugly. Its neck also had a different kind of beauty. There was no doubt about that. Was this still the little black dragon that had escaped? After 7 years, not only did the little black cub's appearance change, but its body also grew to 16 meters, which was similar to its mother's. It was also stronger, which was a visual impact. If it were not for the 4 unique horns that pointed outwards, which overlapped with the appearance of the little black dragon or memory, Sylvia would have suspected that she had mistaken her opponent. Of course, even if its appearance was so different, it did not change the fact that it was a true dragon. What was a dragon? Dragons were majestic, powerful, proud, and glorious. This black dragon could not only satisfy the praises of the true dragons, it could also satisfy all the fantasies people had about dragons. It was simply the model of aesthetics among dragons. Sylvia was tempted. Logically speaking, it was very difficult for female dragons to be tempted by males younger than themselves, but she was. Sylvia remembered that the last time she was tempted and aroused was when she was in the prime of her life, when she looked up an extremely old red dragon that was more than 35 meters long. Of course, the red dragon finally got his wish and raped her, and they stayed together for nearly 3 months. Sylvia didn't even blink as she stared at the majestic black dragon. Caesar also stared at her. After receiving the message from the demon hound Sharp Howl, Caesar immediately knew that the green dragon had appeared. Without stopping to rest, he gathered his dependents and rushed to the battlefield, finally intercepting the enemy before it could leave. However, it seemed that the green dragon and her green capital army had no intention of retreating. Instead, they were prepared to take on this battle. This was also good. He might as well be straightforward and push forward. So this time, Caesar did not plan any strategy, nor did he explain the rules of the battle. He directly had his dependents enter the battlefield and fight the enemy head-on. He wanted to deal with the green dragon, and the underground clan wanted to deal with the green capital army. They were united in their efforts to find their opponents. The black dragon swept over the monsters' heads with majestic wind pressure and sonic booms. His dimensional suppression was beginning to show its prowess, and it was already able to counteract Sylvia's ferocious dragon aura. His figure was also able to inspire the army's dependents to regain their courage. Tear them to shreds. A thunderous voice echoed in the sky above the clan. For Lord Black Dragon, Iradia is ours. The roars of the monsters, accompanied by the sound of an earthquake and the clashing of armors, swords, and axes, formed an immortal battle song. They dragged a vast curtain of smoke behind them, and in the blink of an eye, they were already in front of them. The ogres bent their backs, the thorn beasts arched their backs, the wyverns bared their claws, and the green capital army also prepared to receive a baptism of flesh and blood. One side dared to attack, and the other side dared to receive. Thus the battle erupted. The green capital army, as the defending side, had the initiative in this battle. They had enough time to react. Facing the surging underground clan, the thorn beasts arched their backs, and the thick bone plates that stretched from their heads to their tails opened. Sharp and powerful bone spears shot out. They killed their enemies as if they were shooting targets. The rain of bone spears covered the sky and covered the earth. Before the underground clan could get close, they had already suffered huge losses. Countless greyhound demon centaurs and beastmen were pierced through and fell to the ground. The injured might not have died, but they would be trampled into mud by the surging monsters behind them. And, as the attacking side, the underground clan was not completely at a disadvantage. The vanguard of the Black Dragon army was the greyhound demon centaurs and beastmen. Their position in the army was roughly equivalent to that of a human charging cavalry. Running such a long distance would constantly increase their kinetic energy. Once they reached the border, the damage they would cause to the green capital army was immeasurable. As long as there was no magic protection, the underground clan would be able to shatter the green capital army's defensive line in the first moment of battle. But before they could arrive, dragon breath descended from the sky. Caesar overtook the densely packed monsters below and was the first to charge into the enemy camp. Endless ice breath descended. His target was the green dragon Sylvia, but this did not stop him from killing as many enemies as he could on the way. The black dragon did not hesitate to spit out crystal blue ice breath, plowing through the green capital army from above. He played with the scales of war, increasing his own weight. Just as the ice condensed with a crisp sound, it was smashed apart by the devil hounds. The underground clan had arrived, tearing a hole in the green capital army's defensive line, and the endless beastmen and gray hounds were rapidly expanding this gap. Damn it! As the ruler of the green capital, Sylvia naturally could not let Caesar do as he pleased. Her wyverns could not stop the powerful black dragon, nor did she dare to. She could only act personally. Of course, she also had to act. Now was the time of war, and it was not the time to think about other things. Only when the war was over could she accomplish what she wanted with the attitude of a victor. Sylvia raised her claws. At this time, she really wanted to use plant activation. The green dragon was the chromatic dragon that understood war the most, and her innate ability could even influence the battlefield. But she could not do it now. The vegetation in this area had been cut down and burned to nothing. Casting plant activation would consume a large amount of magic power in the process of stimulating the growth of the plants. In the end, the activated soldiers would be very weak, and the gains would not make up for the losses. She could only take a step back and cast other draconic magic that she had some attainment in. Wind Blade Frenzy Draconic. Spiritual Light bloomed. For an old green dragon, all spells below the legendary level were instantly cast. Sylvia only needed to gently move her magic power, and the spell model would be completed in an instant. The violent transparent blade formed in front of her, spun, and then swung out. Not only did it lock onto the black dragon, but it also attacked all enemies in front of her indiscriminately. But the black dragon did not even have the slightest reaction, as if he did not see the spinning transparent blade coming at him. He did not care and directly charged over, as if he was going to risk his life to get close to her. Sylvia smiled. She had already guessed that this would happen. The black bastard relied on his elemental resistance and would most likely choose to take the magic attack head-on. Her movement speed was indeed not as fast as the opponent, and she was very slow in comparison, but this did not mean that he could really get close to the mother of poison. Iradia is not without something that can punish you, she thought. For this reason, before this, Sylvia deliberately swallowed the Staff of Void. Chapter 124. Indeed, Caesar did not dodge. Firstly, the forest fairy was hidden in his mouth and could not predict or dodge the green dragon spell. Secondly, he had magic resistance, so he did not feel the need to dodge. Rip! Like the sound of metal being cut, the elemental blade cut through Caesar's black crystal scales and then sank into his flesh, leaving a wound that was neither deep nor shallow. Then came the second, the third. Caesar remained focused, but his mood became more serious. Sylvia's spell attack was unexpectedly fierce, and the damage it caused was beyond his imagination. Although Caesar's ability was abnormal enough and had an autonomous control unit that could lock in blood loss, pain, and other bodily reactions, as long as he was not cut or cut, he could still maintain his peak combat power. However, the Green Dragon spell seemed a little too powerful. The numerical display in the assessment device told him that the Green Dragon's ability was still between 536 and 638. Compared to 7 years ago, it had only increased by less than 10 points. However, he did not suffer such serious damage even when he took Sylvia's draconic magic head-on 7 years ago. Sylvia, she found a way to restrain my ability? Caesar came to this conclusion in his mind. To him, this was definitely not good news. Even so, Caesar restrained himself from using the spotless land. He had a clear understanding of the law ability, and after one use, it would have a cooldown period of 6 hours. This meant that he only had one chance. Caesar could use the law ability to destroy the green dragon spell, but not now. He had to get closer. Thus, this guy took Sylvia's draconic magic head-on, ignoring the increasing injuries on his body. He did not even deviate from his flight path as he continued to dive down, firmly locking onto the mother of poisons that was hovering at a low altitude below. So powerful. Sylvia sighed. She had already expected this, so she was not as shocked as she was when she first saw Caesar. However, the mother of poisons was still amazed by the black dragon's elemental resistance. After all, she had already resonated with the void staff and was using that magical item's penetrative ability. However, the opponent's body was still able to reduce the damage caused by magic. At the same time, she couldn't help but admire the black dragon's sturdy physique. Sylvia knew very well that true dragons were extremely sensitive to pain, which was why the sharp wind blades would bring them extreme pain. However, this black dragon didn't even blink, nor did its movements slow down in the slightest. Even the coldest and most powerful true dragon would not be so, right? Sylvia's heart was filled with drama. She stared at the rapidly approaching black dragon and cast another series of spells. Spark, Draconic. Blazing Cinderstorm, Draconic. Starfall, Draconic. I won't die immediately, right? She thought worriedly as she drained all the magic stored in her body and waited for the outcome. It was only now that Caesar knew what the old Magus had faced. Incomparably powerful magic was released at the same time. The majestic energy caused the ground under Sylvia's feet to roll up. The flying five-colored spiritual light covered everything, leaving only an illusory bubble, but it became the only thing in one's field of vision. Following closely behind was the abruptly formed draconic magic. Brilliant light mixed with raging flames exploded in front of Sylvia. That was Spark. Along with it were the rampaging meteorite magic balls and elemental entities, all of which surged out at the same time. In a daze, Caesar seemed to hear the roar of magic. He reckoned that if he were to come into contact with these things, he would be able to take thousands of lives. This would be a path to hell. If he were to continue forward, he would only reach the end of all things and welcome the end of destruction. Any non-legendary level creature would think the same when faced with such a violent storm of mana, and Caesar was no exception. If he did not react, he would repeat the old Magus's mistake. He was extremely confident in his body. Yes, it was not wrong to want to use the dustless land to kill, but confidence did not mean arrogance and stupidity. He knew that there was something wrong with the green dragon's body. He had experienced the damage of her magic firsthand. If he still had the power of command, this combination of attacks would probably cripple him even if he was lucky enough to survive. The power of command was strong, but if he wanted to defeat or even kill the green dragon, he would still have to rely on his own body. If he was crippled by the draconic magic and lost his ability to fight, there would be nothing to talk about in the future. Caesar's thoughts were clear. Thus, in the face of the roaring magic storm, he finally opened his mouth and chanted in a low voice. Power of command, dustless land. Ripples appeared. Compared to the overwhelming power of the green dragon's draconic magic, Caesar's power of command was like a stone sinking into a lake. There was no sound, no splash, only a ripple that gradually spreading out silently. Of course, this did not attract the attention of the mother of poison. In fact, her gaze had been attracted elsewhere. A troop of undead cavalry had appeared out of nowhere, stepping on blue soulfire. The sound of their hooves was like a uniform drum beat, wantonly reaping lives and specifically targeting some of her tyrannical kin. She had to solve the problem in front of her as soon as possible. The Green Army needed her help. They were already at a disadvantage. Sylvia thought, but when she turned around, she found that her magic had completely dissipated. It did not cause any waves, as if it had never appeared. The sky in front of her was clear. Of course, there was also the black dragon who was about to reach her. Sylvia's mind was filled with doubts, but before she could think about it, she was shocked to find that her effect with the void staff was linked. It was broken. Then, something even more terrifying happened. She felt that her body was digesting the thing in her stomach. The void staff was being dissolved, as if it was not a magical item, but a stone and metal that she had casually swallowed. This was impossible. This did not make sense. What did he do to me? For the first time, Sylvia's heart was filled with a strong fear of the unknown. The other party had displayed an ability that was beyond her understanding and imagination. Should she continue to fight to find out, or just to be safe and open a portal to escape? Sylvia hesitated for 1 to 2 seconds when dealing with sudden incidents that went against the rules. She was a little hesitant. This hesitation would make her regret it for the rest of her life. It was this moment of confusion that Caesar seized the opportunity. The black dragon was already in front of her. Although he was only 16 meters tall, his exceptionally strong body was like a meteor falling from the sky, crashing into the slender body of the Green Army's leader. The mother of poison, who had always maintained absolute safety around her, was closed in. At the same time as the teeth-numbing collision sounded, the solid touch made Caesar let out an excited dragon roar. "Got you!" Chapter 125. The next moment, the 2 true dragons descended from the sky. The green dragon's levitation spell was unable to support the black dragon's charge, and they fell straight down without any buffer. Their extremely heavy weight caused extremely high damage to the ground. Boom! This was the sound of the ground trembling and earth exploding. Even in the smoke-filled battlefield, the sound was intimidating and spread to every corner of the area. The surface of the ground that had already been peeled off by the mana storm was once again dug up, overturned, and then shattered. The sand and dust produced by the fall was like a shock wave, surging and rolling up violently, and then spreading in all directions. "Got you," Caesar thought. To him, this was a temporary victory. After painstaking effort, he finally had the chance to truly deal damage to the old green dragon. He flipped over and climbed out of the hole he created. He shook his head, shaking off the dust and dirt that covered his mouth and nose. This kind of fall was nothing to Caesar. His steel-like scales and muscles could protect his organs well, so he wouldn't suffer from any internal displacement or concussion. The black dragon was in good condition. At this moment, Sylvia also raised her head. The true dragon's unique body structure and abnormal flexibility had greatly cushioned the impact. Moreover, the old green dragon's life force was strong enough to begin with. Although the collision had caused some confusion, it was not enough to have any substantial effect on the mother of poisons. Roar! However, the green dragon was still furious. Sylvia couldn't help but open her mouth and roar. She used some of her recovered mana to construct a draconic spell, ready to unleash it. As an old green dragon that had lived for more than 400 years, she had long been able to control her emotions. Under normal circumstances, Sylvia would find it difficult to fall into such a state of rage. However, this time, the mother of poison was beyond furious. In fact, her anger stemmed from her uneasiness, from the fear of discovering that things were out of her control. The reason for this was Caesar. This black dragon had given her too many surprises, causing her to be in a sorry state and at a loss of what to do. At this moment, the black dragon pounced on him again. Sylvia didn't know why, but she subconsciously took a step back, stunned by the opponent's ferocious aura. She spat out a mouthful of poisonous breath to block and defend herself, and then smashed her draconic magic down. Strong wind explosion draconic. At this moment, it was obvious that Sylvia's nerves were tense, and she was truly panicking. This was because when facing an enemy in front of her, her first goal wasn't to defeat or kill her opponent. Instead, she wanted to open up some space and maintain a safe distance. Due to the wrong decision, the first spell she cast was not an offensive spell with great lethality, but a highly effective repelling spell. Unfortunately, the results were minimal. It was as if the black dragon had gone mad. He did not care about the ferocity of the attacks or the strength of the poison breath. He simply ignored the repelling spells and the poison breath and charged straight in. At the same time, Caesar could clearly feel that the threat of magic to him was decreasing. Sylvia's magic had plummeted to a whole new level and was no longer at the same level as before. Opportunity. During a battle, one could not afford to be distracted, so Sylvia also maintained a high level of vigilance and focus. Seeing Caesar charging over, the green dragon turned slightly, bent its right hind leg halfway, bent its knee, and twisted its waist in one smooth motion, and launched a powerful tail flick. To a green dragon, a tail flick was always more powerful than a swipe of its claws or a bite. The reason was that the muscles of the green dragon's tail were different from the other Pinochet dragons. That part was relatively strong. In terms of tail strength alone, they were not weaker than some red dragons of the same stage. Moreover, at the end of their tails, there was a tumor-like, horny aggregate full of spikes. It was the same structure as Caesar's tail before it was modified. It was like a battering ram, heavy and powerful, but more agile. It was the green dragon's most powerful close-range weapon. Finally, the black dragon made a dodging action for the first time. However, Sylvia did not see how the other party dodged. It was as if the other party had just dodged and avoided the tail flick attack. Under the effects of the hormones, Caesar's strength and speed were extremely terrifying. Due to the uniqueness of a true dragon as a magical creature, even the ancient dragons and immemorial dragons of the Pinochet dragon stage could not compete with Caesar in terms of speed without the support of magic. As mentioned before, this was a black dragon that was getting faster and faster. There were no more surprises. Caesar had already arrived. He lowered his head and crashed into Sylvia. The four towering horns on his head easily pierced through the green dragon's shiny scales like paper, leaving four hair-raising bloody holes. The mother of poison, a true dragon with a body length of 20 meters, was directly flipped over by the 16-meter black dragon. The powerful impact caused her to fly across the ground, leaving behind a crevice that looked like it had been plowed. "It's trying to kill me." The intense pain and the black dragon's ferocious charge made this thought flash through Sylvia's mind. Then, she confirmed it and believed it without a doubt. She reacted and immediately got up. In this situation, Sylvia did not dare to have any wishful thinking. First, she had to ensure her own safety. She used her strongest ability, even if it meant accidentally killing the other party. The green dragon raised its head and extracted a certain amount of life force. The magic storm rose again, condensed and roared. "Fierce wind, listen to my call." Her words were cut off. Caesar was faster than her. In fact, he had already caught up the moment the green dragon was flipped over. This guy pounced on the old green dragon, his tail and hind legs clamping into the green dragon's body at the same time. At the same time, his left claw grabbed the green dragon's neck and his right claw pressed down on the upper and lower jaws of the green dragon's head, causing the mother of poison's magic storm to die prematurely. The outcome was decided. The threat brought by this kind of control was fatal. Sylvia did not dare to move. She only used her tail to lightly slap the ground, a sign of submission among dragons. After a pause, she said softly, "I admit defeat. I'm yours." Dragons had a different way of speaking. Even if their mouths were closed, they could still speak clearly. Caesar had done it before. Admit defeat? Surrender? You think that because you're a female dragon, you should be treated well? After losing the war, you think that surrendering is the end of the matter? Caesar stared at her with his deep red eyes, mocking her sarcastically. At the same time, he exerted force with his front claw and pressed the mother of poison's head firmly to the ground, causing it to be unable to move. Then, the black dragon's voice turned cold. "You seem to have forgotten why I'm here. I'm taking revenge," he said to himself. No, true dragons were very sensitive creatures, not to mention an old dragon that was more than 400 years old. It knew how to read people's minds. Sylvia sharply sensed the cruelty in the black dragon's words. She screamed in shock, "You can't kill me. We're Pinochet dragons. We're all citizens of Her Majesty Tiamat. We're not allowed to kill each other or fight to the death. This is the rule set by the ancient dragons. There won't be such a rule in the future." Caesar said expressionlessly. Sylvia's slender neck was as fragile as a bamboo pole in front of him. Under his powerful strength, it was instantly crushed into a pile of scrap. Blood and flesh splattered out from the black dragon's claws. At this moment, the green dragon's pupils suddenly widened to an abnormal limit. At the same time, it seemed to use all its strength to tighten its muscles and straighten its body. Then it painfully struggled twice before it died. Chapter 126. Only then did Caesar heave a heavy sigh of relief. He knew very well that killing the true dragon, Nossa Silvia Rambalaffa, was not a wise move. The other party was not Angra, nor was she a young dragon who had just reached adulthood and stayed in the Underdark. She was a true dragon who had lived in Iradia for more than 400 years. Who knew if this dragon had a mate or a relative? Killing her and ignoring the rules would mean that Caesar would face even more ferocious and powerful revenge in the future. If emotional factors aside, the best choice for the black dragon would be to control her. But Caesar could not do that. He was not Roy, and did not have the ability to control creatures like Roy did. He still had not figured out what Roy's method was. The old green dragon's magic was beyond his imagination, and was not something that Caesar could hope to match. She was stronger than him in the first place. If not for the loss in the Dustless Land, Caesar would not have the ability to suppress such an old true dragon under normal circumstances. Surrender? Just like that? Caesar did not believe it. There was no way an old true dragon, as well as the ambitious ruler of the Green Capital, would willingly submit to him. The Mother of Poisons had only been forced to do so because of the claws on her neck. If the Mother of Poisons were allowed to recover, the situation would be completely different. Leaving her alive would cause endless trouble. Once the green dragon betrayed him, Caesar would have all his trump cards exposed, and Sylvia's revenge would render him powerless. It would be fine if the forces that he had painstakingly built up were burned to the ground, but once he was caught, even if the green dragon did not kill him, she would use magic to pin him under her claws, and he would not be able to rise again for the rest of his life. This was something that Caesar could not accept. Moreover, as a green dragon, Sylvia's nature was not to be taken away. This dragon wanted to eat Luna, so she had to die. This was not a decision made on the spur of the moment, but a choice made after careful consideration. There would be gold, and there would be female dragons, but not now. Caesar said to himself. He let go of the lifeless dragon corpse and turned his gaze to the battlefield. His subordinates had taken drugs, so the Green Capital Army was no match for the underground clans. They were already retreating, and after the Mother of Poison fell into eternal slumber, these chaotic fellows were completely defeated. The wyverns declared their allegiance, while the bloodbats and thorn beasts fled in all directions. Only the ogres were still stubbornly resisting. However, they were not doing this for the Green Capital, but for the dead chieftain Doga. They wanted revenge. It was a pity that the ogre's path of vengeance only ended in death. They howled and fought, and then were harvested one by the undead knights. The war ended. The wild boar people, Ankhegs, and shapeshifters finally entered the area. They were responsible for cleaning up the battlefield, counting the casualties, collecting the weapons, and storing the corpses of the monsters as food. This was not something that Caesar needed to care about. The wild boar people worked in an orderly and meticulous manner. Their leader, Parful, was also very easy to deal with. Caesar did not need to worry about him. What Caesar should be thinking about now was how to deal with the dragon corpse. Can it be turned into a skeletal dragon? Caesar asked without turning his head. After the war ended, he let the Black Knight, Nigendro, and the other leaders come to his side. They looked at the huge green dragon corpse together, admiring the biggest harvest of this war. I think it should be possible. Nigendro's voice was a little hoarse. He really did not expect that the Black Dragon Lord was planning to use the same trick again and create another skeletal dragon. Among the true dragons, this should be the type with a twisted personality, right? Even an undead like him thought so. It's just that, my lord. The shadow energy in the first burial ground has been completely extracted by the previous skeletal dragon. It will take at least 200 years for it to recover naturally. As for the other two shadow pools, they were formed in the last few hundred years. They're not even half as rich as the first burial ground. The effect is worrying. I really don't recommend you do this. It was obvious that Najindro was very afraid of being blamed. He always made a statement in advance and clearly explained the worst possible outcome. After all, turning into a skeletal dragon was the worst way to use it. It was a waste of the true dragon's corpse. Now, on top of this foundation, half of it would be wasted. This was no different from wasting God's gift. Forgive me for being presumptuous, Your Majesty. At this time, Hogg also interrupted. He had not recovered from the wound on his stomach after being chiseled by the ogre chief. He also had a few new injuries on the battlefield, but he was still full of energy. I agree with the Black Knight. I don't recommend you turn this dragon into a skeletal dragon. What do you mean? Caesar turned his gaze to the gnoll leader. He was a bit confused. He was not worried about Hogg's loyalty. It was just that when he first turned into a calamity dragon, this guy was in favor of it. Why'd he change his mind now? Could it be that even the gnolls had a double standard now? Please allow me to remind you, Your Majesty. The green dragon is not a calamity dragon. It is a true dragon native to Iradia and grew up on this land. Hogg slightly bent his waist. When I was very young, even in a foreign country, I also heard the name Green, capital Jade. Before entering old age and winning the war with the northern countries, Sylvia's title was still Green, capital Jade, and not Mother of Poison. In Iradia, it's not that there are no stories of dragons killing each other. In fact, for those who break the rules, the true dragons don't deliberately look for offenders to punish. This is inseparable from the laziness of the chromatic dragons. Most of the time, they just happen to meet and fight. Hogg explained in a low voice. He was very smart. In fact, he had already noticed the difference between Caesar and the true dragons, but he never mentioned it to anyone. He only talked about it as it was. However, turning into a skeletal dragon has touched the bottom line of the true dragons. Your Majesty, you know the rules and the bottom line are completely different. In the eyes of the true dragons, this is equivalent to playing with the dead. The green dragon is not like the calamity dragon that no one cares about. The news will spread easily. But in Iradia, magic can make everything visible. As long as the true dragons want to inquire about the status of the green dragon, even if it is hidden in the Underdark, Your Majesty, you will not be able to hide from those eyes. After saying that, Hogg lowered his head in silence. He had said enough. This guy, is he really a gnoll? These words made Caesar's mind move away from the green dragon's corpse. He stared at the leader who had followed him for 7 years, just like when he first accepted the gnoll's loyalty. Even if the gnoll Hogg was smart and strong, it was impossible for him to obtain such knowledge. Even Caesar knew nothing about this. So how could this guy know so much? How do you know? Caesar stared at the gnoll leader. He had long felt that this guy had a story, but he never asked or paid attention to it. But now, he couldn't help but be suspicious. This is a difficult story to tell, Your Majesty. Hogg still lowered his head. You could tell me quietly. Caesar raised his chin, indicating that the Black Knight and the Battle Lizard Man should leave for the time being. You may know that the newborn gnoll cubs are not much different from the cubs of ordinary wargs. Hogg watched them leave, blinked his eyes, and said, Less than an hour after I was born, my parents were all killed, and I became the pet of a human noble mage, the kind of pet that was chained and locked in a cage. I heard a lot of things from the conversations between the noble and other humans. Although a long time has passed and the faces are blurred, I remember everything they said, word for word. Later, when I grew up and could stand on my feet, I was sent to the arena to fight with the Taurens, goat men, and even some dragon men. Chapter 127. Hogg did have a long story, and Caesar was also interested in listening to it. He was meticulous in some details and asked questions from time to time. Although the jackalen answered smoothly, it took him a long time to explain his background clearly. The successive victories in the Colosseum won a lot of wealth for his master, and he began to pay attention to this jackalen cub. For a long time after that, in order to show that he had been domesticated, Hogg was like a dog, a real dog, a domestic dog. He even imitated the habits and was very obedient. Even if his master asked him to harm himself, Hog did not hesitate. Moreover, this guy actually knew how to speak, but he never opened his mouth. He acted like a degenerate, stupid beast, only knowing how to bark, howl, and wag his tail stupidly. In order to show off his beast-taming skills, his master took off Hog's collar in public more than once. But this jackalen was very smart. A short period of freedom was not enough to expose him. Even if the chain was taken off, he was very obedient. Hog maintained the image of a loyal dog for 6 years. 6 years of time was enough to completely grind away a person's vigilance. 6 years of time even caused Hog to start doubting himself, doubting if he had really been tamed. But at the critical moment, he still made a choice that belonged to the jackalen. During a wild hunt, this pet, which was much stronger than ordinary jackalans, devoured his master, killed all the retinues, regained his freedom, and began to escape. He had ruled more than one jackalen tribe, but they were all shattered and killed in the battle with other beasts and monsters. They were all exiled in the wilderness. If he had not met the black dragon, Hog might have been a character. Of course, he was still a character now. It was already very late, and the sound of people on the battlefield gradually died down. Only the troops in charge of the follow-up work continued to wander around the battlefield. Cleaning the battlefield was not a small task. Although it was not dangerous, it was still a big project. It would probably last for a day or two. As for the other clans, they had already gathered together to celebrate. This was the first victory of the underground clans in Aladia, so of course, it was worth commemorating. They ate meat as food, drank blood as wine, and formed their own groups. Whistles and roars rose and fell one after another. "Okay, I know," Caesar said to the jackalen leader. "Go and rest. Your wolf cubs are waiting for you. Allow me to leave, your majesty." After careful consideration, Caesar finally gave up the idea of turning the green dragon into a skeleton dragon. First, the pool of undead shadow had limited power, and second, even if he could perfectly transform, he might not be able to come to bear with the consequences. Moreover, there was another hidden consideration. The green dragon was different from the calamity dragon. The calamity dragon's god was the night dragon Pharazer, while the green dragon's god was the dragon queen Tiamat. Tiamat was the common god of the Penishade dragons. Caesar was afraid that he might have to deal with that god in the future, so it was better to keep a low profile. In fact, he really wanted to have a daughter and raise them all underground. Just thinking about it made him happy. Forget it. The black dragon opened its mouth, and ice breath gushed out again. It completely froze the dead mother of poison, creating a beautiful but horrifying ice sculpture. He hadn't thought of a way to deal with the dragon's corpse yet, so he decided to keep it in cold storage for the time being. In fact, he didn't have to do this because the corpses of all magical creatures would not decay until the elemental energy in their bodies had completely dissipated. Dragons were not undead knights. They had flesh and blood, and while the energy ensured that their flesh and blood would not decay, their flesh and blood could also lock in the energy very well. This was simply a virtuous cycle. Of course, Caesar didn't understand any of this. This blind Aladian came from another world, so some of his beliefs were deeply ingrained in him. He firmly believed that ice could better preserve dead objects, and he really did do so. This made the beastmen in charge of moving the dragon's corpse suffer. The frozen green dragon was 30% larger than before, and these guys lived in the scorching heat of the north, so their resistance to cold temperatures was quite low. After carrying the ice sculpture for a long time, they were all shivering from the cold, and even trembling as they walked. In the end, this hard work could only be left to the undead knights. For some reason, these skeletons were inexplicably compatible with the ice and snow. The mother of poison returned to Green Capital, to the Emerald Palace. At the same time, she brought with her the new master. Caesar began to fully take over the Green Capital's forces. As the Green Dragon's guards, the Wyverns were the first to declare their allegiance. As descendants of dragons, it was natural for them to obey the more powerful true dragon. Even if they were once Sylvia's trusted subordinates, this nature couldn't be changed. "We are happy to serve you, my master. This is our honor." The wyvern leader crawled in front of Caesar. Sylvia's death didn't affect these guys in the slightest. The wyvern still maintained a calm aura. Even before the mother of poison fell into eternal slumber, they had sworn to fight to the death for her. These guys' heads looked like a black dragon, of course, not like Caesar, but a normal black dragon, but they were smaller and sharper. They only had 2 hind legs, and their hooked toes were like enlarged chicken claws. Their forelimbs were like most birds' wings, covered in small and ugly mottled scales and feathers, and their tails were like a snake's. It was said that they were a hybrid between a true dragon and a griffin, and their teeth were very sharp. Some of them were even gifted with the ability to breathe acid, such as the wyvern leader in front of him. Caesar had noticed it during the war. "Very good. From now on, your name will be Husky." The battle lizardman leader had died in battle, and this name was given to a new candidate. As descendants of dragons, although wyverns and battle lizardmen had different levels, there wouldn't be any conflict between them. In order to avoid some things that might happen, Caesar decided to organize these descendants of dragons into an independent force that wouldn't interact with the other underground clans. He had already thought about it. In the future, the leader of the descendants of dragons in the Black Dragon Army would be called Husky. This was a title, a glory, a history, and a legacy. The Black Dragon was very satisfied with this. "Thank you for your gift." The wyvern leader bowed and enjoyed it. Other than the wyverns, Caesar also ordered his subordinates to capture the escaping thorn beasts. These monsters were also very strong, especially in positional and defensive battles. They had caused a lot of losses to the Black Dragon Army, and he didn't plan to let them go. He summoned the wyverns mainly for an important matter. "You've been by the Green Dragon's side for so long. You should know where Sylvia's treasure trove is. Bring me there." Caesar ordered the wyvern leader. Even if the dragons were so strong and cruel, there were still countless people in Iradia who flocked to them. Among them, there were a few who were truly kind, but most of them were just using the slogan of justice to covet the rich treasures that the dragons had accumulated through killing and plundering. The death of every dragon was a celebration for the warriors. Of course, this was a normal situation. Even if Caesar was a chromatic dragon, he didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. Moreover, now is the time for the Black Dragon Army to celebrate. The rich wealth of the Green Capital, along with the eternal slumber of the Mother of Poison, everything would belong to him. However, the wyvern leader gave him an unexpected reply. "Please forgive me, my master. The word treasure is taboo. The Green Dragon doesn't allow anyone to mention it. Even I don't know where the Mother of Poison's treasures are hidden." These words made Caesar turn around, his red eyes staring at the wyvern leader who was prostrating himself on the ground. This guy also had a premonition that things weren't good, so he quickly added, "But my master, I know that the Mother of Poison doesn't allow anyone to step into the Emerald Palace, and behind the main hall is an absolute forbidden area that no one dares to step into. Other than the Mother of Poison, no one knows what's there. What else could there be, other than the treasures that she treasured like her life?" Chapter 128. This is definitely the Green Dragon's treasure trove. She treats it like a treasure. This place, even the door, is a magic item filled with elemental energy. Without a spell, you won't be able to open it, Caesar. The wyvern leader had already retreated. It had already told him everything it knew, so there was no need for it to stay in the Emerald Palace. Caesar sent it to the mixed lizardmen and wyverns. Now, the one talking to the Black Dragon was the child of the forest, Luna. "Can't open it?" Caesar looked up and down at the door that was more than 20 meters long and wide. He couldn't help but think of the legendary story of Open Sesame in his previous life. Spell? Iradia was really imaginative. In fact, he had already come into contact with similar things. The statue and the steel door in the ruins of the Orc City were also magic items that needed to be unshackled by flames. Caesar still used the same old trick. He swung his tail with enough force to flip a giant dragon and directly used it on the door of the treasure trove. A familiar scene appeared. Ripples of magical power appeared on the surface of the door, made of mithril and engraved with the picture of a green dragon. Silently, it absorbed all of Caesar's power without any reaction. Then, a slight tremor came from the Emerald Palace. This thing had a unique conductive structure that could distribute the force received to the treetop fortress below, or even to the entire green capital. If one wanted to destroy it with brute force, one would need to have the power to flip the entire green capital over. Of course, the green dragon wouldn't let anyone steal her treasure so easily. She would definitely guard it to the death. Even if she died, the mother of poison would probably want to bring all these things to hell. If it was the Caesar of the past, he would probably be helpless at this moment. But it didn't seem to be the case now. The spotless land. This guy directly used the power of command. He couldn't wait any longer. Although he didn't view wealth as much as life like other true dragons, Caesar couldn't resist the temptation of wealth. Moreover, he really needed money. A cool breeze came, and the elemental energy floating around was instantly annihilated and disappeared without a trace. At the same time, the flowing inscriptions on the mithril door also disappeared as if it had lost its power. It's been destroyed. Sure enough, it works. Luna's exclamation and the black dragon's whisper were heard at the same time. This was only Caesar's attempt. Judging from the characteristics of the spotless land annihilation spell, he guessed that the power of command would also work on magical objects. He was determined to give it a try. What happened next confirmed his hypothesis. The mithril door, which was valued by the green dragon and used to guard the treasure vault, was as fragile as a bubble in front of the dustless land. It would burst with a single poke, and its effectiveness would collapse. Caesar did not have the time to be amazed. He was more concerned about the green dragon's treasure. He reached out his tail claw and gently pushed it, and the door opened with a bang. What she saw next made little Luna let out an "oh" sound. The first thing that came into view was an inestimable amount of yellow, shiny gold coins and neatly arranged, unpolished gold bars. The amount and value of the gold bars were enough to make one's heart skip a beat. And behind them, there were diamonds, pearls, and gemstones. Caesar grabbed a handful of them and rubbed them in his hand. The treasures were like a waterfall, and when they fell one by one, they made a crisp sound like hail hitting glass. And the most eye-catching thing was the neatly arranged magical objects placed in the crystal containers. There were more than 10 of the rare treasures in Iradia here, and all of them were shining brightly, as if they were welcoming the arrival of a new owner. However, no, Luna screamed. It was as if there was an invisible hand that gently brushed past, slow but firm. The magical objects all cracked and collapsed under it, and then lost their effectiveness one by one. At the same time, Caesar felt the pressure. The power of the spotless land came from his spirit, but to destroy so many magical objects, his spirit was rapidly being drained and lost. Drowsiness and exhaustion hit him like a tide. "Stop," he said, but it was already too late. 3 magical items were annihilated and turned into ordinary decorations. The dustless land was as ferocious as a flood. Caesar was distracted for a moment and was careless. The little one flapped her wings and rushed towards the magical objects in the crystal containers like a little money grubber, hugging the destroyed magical objects. Actually, the forest fairies were not greedy. They were not interested in gold coins and treasures, but they had a special fondness for magical objects. This is the freezing glove, this, the sweet dreams sleeping bag, and this one, the shadow robe. Luna was so distressed that she felt like crying, "Ooh, they're all destroyed." The forest fairies were not like dragons, wanting to take any treasure for themselves. Luna was just distressed. Due to their race, the forest fairies would involuntarily feel a sense of appreciation towards magical objects. This was their nature. Due to their high sensitivity towards magic and elements, they could also distinguish the authenticity, effectiveness, and grade of magical objects at a glance. At the same time, they would think that magical objects were the crystallization of wisdom and could feel the effort that the forger of the object had put into it, resonating with this spirit. This was an extremely strange feeling for a true dragon, but it did exist. The forest fairies would treat all magical objects as if they were their own, hoping that their owners would use and cherish these treasures well. That was why little Luna was very distressed. However, the simple-minded Caesar would not have such feelings. He had only extracted information from Luna's words, and after learning that the 3 items were not powerful items, he breathed a sigh of relief. However, just by looking at them, it could be seen that whether it was the placement, the materials, or the structure of these items, they were all far from the high-grade items behind. They were probably just magical objects that had reached the lowest standard to enter the Green Dragon's treasury. It's okay. It's not a loss to test the ability of the spotless land. Caesar comforted himself. If he knew that a magical object close to legendary, the Void Staff, had been destroyed in the Green Dragon's stomach, who knew what he would think? Wait! Luna suddenly looked up and stopped whining. Caesar, did you destroy all these magical objects? She suddenly realized that the mithril door had only cracked open after the Dark Dragon's whisper. And just now, Caesar had softly told him to stop, and only then did the continuous destruction of the magical items stop. Could it be yes? Caesar nodded repeatedly. Why, I destroyed my own things. Do I have to pay for it? This is Mage's Disjunction. This is a secret technique recorded in the secret scrolls of some legendary races. Of course, Luna did not intend to let Caesar pay for it. In contrast, she was more concerned about her black dragon's growth. How do you know this spell? My talent has awakened. I'm a true dragon. He had no choice. Although he didn't want to lie to little Luna, he couldn't possibly tell her that he had a black dream. Even if Caesar wanted to tell the little girl the truth, he couldn't say it out loud. In Eladia, who was shrouded in the light of divine authority, there were some things that might cause chaos if he said it. This was not a joke, but the truth. Caesar had already felt that the light of Iradia's divine authority was too dazzling. Theology suppressed everything. In this place, even the basic science of medicine could not be born. All diseases and injuries were summarized as curses. Perhaps it had been born, but Caesar did not continue to think about it. Chapter 129. This is a grappling whip. Its effect is to wrap up any creature that is below the limit of its size. The so-called limit refers to creatures that are less than half the length of the whip. Humans, gnolls, and the like can all be caught. Little Luna led the big black dragon over one by one. She was blindly explaining the effects of the magical items on display to the Iradia. But monsters as big as you can't be caught at all. Storage shoulder strap. There are words on it. It was made by Byron. Oh, Byron. That's a brilliant elven blacksmith. This place was a collection of all the magical items that the Green Dragon had collected over the past 400 years. It was priceless. It is connected to a small dimensional space. The user can easily locate and store any item in it, but there is also a limit to the size. Caesar followed closely behind Luna like a student. He listened attentively to the little girl's detailed explanation. He also took notes in his mind, memorizing the effects of each magical item. The Green Dragon's treasury was extremely rich. Even if the magical items were not taken into account, the value of the treasures alone was enough to buy half a city and a few armies. Unfortunately, true dragons were no different from goblins in this regard. They were only interested in rolling around and sleeping in piles of shiny treasures. They did not know that gold, silver, and gems that were not spent were no different from pile of rocks. Transformation necklace. Pure mithril. This should be the more advanced kind. Let me see. Luna easily picked up the necklace that was about her size. Mithril was stronger than steel, but as light as a feather. It was a type of magical metal that Iradia was mainstream. The Northern Alliance alone had more than 4 mithril mines. It has 2 customizable templates. You can change your disguise. Let's try it, Luna muttered. Then she glanced at Caesar and began to use the magical item. Pop! The sound was like a brocade fish blowing bubbles. It was light and simple. Under the cover of a light-colored magical aura, Luna began to change her appearance. Soon, a small Caesar appeared in front of Caesar. That's right, Luna transformed herself into a dragon, imitating Caesar's form. Her appearance was exactly the same. Even her eyes were dark red, but her body was 10 times smaller than his, belonging to the miniature version. However, this was clearly a knockoff. Caesar could see through the verification device that even after becoming a dragon, the little guy's ability value remained between 1 and 2. However, with Caesar's body size, even if it was shrunk by 10 times, it would still be more than a meter long, which was much larger than Luna's original 30 centimeters. That's all I can do. Luna, who had turned into a miniature version of Caesar, looked up at the black dragon. Although I can change my disguise at will, if I want to change the size of my body, I still need to be strong enough. This is all I can do. You'd better change. Don't copy me, okay? It looks weird enough. Caesar poked her with his hooked toe joint. Okay, wait for me to remove this template, then add a new one. This requires a little bit of magic input, but it's very little. Even I could do it easily. Pop. This time, the little guy turned into the appearance of a proper female black dragon. Her body was so thin that only skin and bones were left. Her jagged wings were like those of a skeletal dragon. Her facial bones pierced through the skin, and there were dark gray scales. This appearance subconsciously reminded Caesar of Blakesia. Speaking of which, he really didn't know where those two idiots had gone, and he didn't have time to inquire about them. How is it? Does it look good? Luna asked excitedly, wagging her tail that had never been there before, circling in front of him. It seemed that the little guy's liveliness was back, and she was having a lot of fun. I think so, because her body was already more than 1 meter long. The previous pinching and holding could no longer be used, so Caesar directly carried her over. Iradia Black Dragon really doesn't look good. Oh, okay. Luna didn't say anything, and probably couldn't understand Caesar's aesthetics. With a bang, she returned to her original form, becoming a pocket-sized girl again, and held up the transformation necklace. Do you want to try? Caesar. Yes. Caesar said. In fact, in order to facilitate movement, no true dragon would always maintain their original form. Even the red dragon, who considered herself mighty and hated other forms, would use transformation magic when necessary. Caesar was the same. In fact, a long time ago, Caesar had thought about a very serious question, and that was, if he came to Iradia and transformed into a dragon, would he still be human? From a biological point of view, he was no longer human. Moreover, after arrival, he, who had obtained a certain amount of basic knowledge of dragons, even his way of thinking was likely to have changed. This process was irreversible, and he was no longer the original Qinjing. Of course, he wasn't a completely pure true dragon, because the human way of thinking was still dominant, and he didn't inherit many of the true dragon's habits, such as glory, greed, and so on. For him, it was enough to understand these 2 points. After all, he wasn't a philosopher or a thinker, and there was no need to think deeper. He already knew that he was no longer the human he used to be, but he wasn't a true dragon either. He was Caesar. Caesar Orderonso Tangerine. Under this premise, the body was no longer important. Caesar didn't care, and was even more interested in his current appearance. But now, he didn't need to use the transformation necklace, because there was a practical need. It was possible that he had to rely on this thing to deal with the enemy hiding in the northern kingdoms. Roy. Caesar didn't think that directly starting a war would work. Absolute power could indeed sweep through everything, but the Black Dragon didn't have that kind of power. Even if he could completely digest the remnants of Green Capital and had a strong army in the future, attacking Khaki meant that he would have to contend against the entire Northern Kingdom's alliance, and he still wasn't qualified. The Mother of Poison and Caesar weren't the only 2 evil dragons north of Iradia, but the Green Dragon didn't attack the Northern Kingdoms, and neither did the other Penishade dragons. Caesar didn't want to be the first. There were only 2 outcomes for being the first. Either you earn a lot of money and became rich overnight, or you were hanged from the mast and used as an example. After the Battle of Green Capital, Caesar felt that his good luck was about to run out, and he didn't dare to gamble again. Yes, the spotless land was strong, and he could easily deal with a great wizard, but what about 10? Or 100? Then what was the point of fighting? He had to use some other methods. That's right. Why don't I go to Black Dream and see if I can get some useful rewards from this battle? Black Dream and Iradia's time didn't interfere with each other, so Caesar didn't have to worry about the little guy holding the necklace, and directly emptied his consciousness into the dark space. Chapter 130. Caesar was disappointed. The Black Dream was as silent as ever, as if even the air did not exist. There was only the display case that towered into the sky, the trophies in it competing with each other, sparkling brightly. But none of them left the display case and appeared in front of him. They were separated by an anti-theft glass, probably strong enough to make the gods shrink back. It shouldn't be. The black dragon stood up on its hind legs and stood up foolishly, pacing back and forth in front of the display case, thinking back and forth. Logically speaking, there was no doubt that the green dragon was an incomparably strong opponent. Defeating her and seizing the power of the green capital, logically speaking, there should be some sort of reward. Even if it was a bronze-level reward, there should at least be some sort of reward. Caesar had lowered his expectations quite a bit, but the Black Dream was dead silent. No one answered. It seemed to have a hidden operating system, but there were no signs of intelligence. Even with the level of scientific development in his previous life, there were widespread human-computer interaction systems on Earth, but this Black Dream that came with him did not have the slightest sign of humanity. So he could only rely on the Black Dragon to guess it himself. Defeating the Green Dragon and taking over the Green Capital was a milestone victory. In the Black Dream, the most likely achievement rewards were strong enemy, authority, and revenge. But strong enemy and authority had appeared before, and considering the possibility that the trophies might exist, it was understandable that they did not appear. But the trophy related to revenge also did not appear. This was something that Caesar did not expect. In fact, he entered the dark space this time for it. But the Black Dream did not seem to want to fulfill Caesar's wish. Why? Caesar thought for a moment and quickly understood. It was actually very easy to guess. The Green Dragon was not his direct target for revenge, and could even be considered as a side character. The initiator was someone else, Roy and the Brindle family. In that case, killing the Green Dragon, the mother of poison, was far from the end. In fact, it was just the beginning. Well, since there was nothing new in the Dark Dream, Caesar did not continue to stay here. There was nothing to see, and he had more or less guessed the reward for the achievement, so he turned around and left the dark space. At this moment, if one were to observe carefully enough, they would notice that the Black Dragon's pupils had slightly dilated and then contracted. This meant that Caesar had returned to reality. Little Luna was still holding the transformation necklace in her hand. Only then did she ask him, "Caesar, do you want to input your own mana to construct the disguise form template?" Because she mistook the dustless land for the mage's disjunction, Luna believed the explanation of Black Dragon's talent awakening. She thought that he really awakened the elemental bloodline and had magic power flowing in his body. The little fellow didn't even think about it. If there really was magic in Caesar's body, how could she not detect it? "No, it's better if you help me." Fortunately, Caesar was not so arrogant that he didn't know himself. He knew very well that he was ignorant of the law. There was not even a little elemental mana in his body, so he couldn't complete such an operation. In fact, it was still unknown to him whether he could use magic items like a real dragon. "Okay," Luna nodded. The little fellow's mind was relatively straightforward. She didn't think of anything else. She nodded subconsciously. "What kind of disguise form do you want?" Constructing the disguise form according to Caesar's description sounded like a very difficult technical work. But in fact, it was not difficult for Luna at all, because the two already had a very tacit understanding. The little fellow had made more than 60 illustrations of game cards under Caesar's description, which were all drawn by her stroke by stroke. No wonder the little fellow attached so much importance to it. She had been constantly thinking about it and begged Caesar to help her wherever she went. Well, Caesar thought for a moment, then began to describe. I want a human noble, the kind with soft skin and tender flesh. At the same time, don't be too young. About 30 years old, but don't have a beard. Of course, Caesar was not making the face based on personal preference. He asked Luna to make the character for a purpose. In the current situation, the Black Dragon needed a human disguise form to ensure that he could enter the northern kingdoms openly without being besieged. In a short period of time after leaving the Black Dream, Caesar had a rough plan in his mind and had already begun to implement it. Have a healthy body, don't be deformed, don't be ugly, and the appearance must conform to the orthodox aesthetic of the Iradia humans. Sigh, he sighed in annoyance. It means that the appearance must be good-looking. Logically speaking, to enter the northern kingdoms, there should be no requirements for the appearance, as long as it was a human. However, Caesar wanted to play the role of a noble, and it had to be the kind of noble with a long history. And the children of that kind of family could not be too ugly unless they were deformed themselves. Because, even if there were political considerations, the nobles would not marry women who were too ugly as their wives. Most of their wives belonged to the category of beauty in the human aesthetic. In this way, due to genetic screening from generation to generation, the children of the families with a long history would not be related to ugliness. Some accidental genetic mutations were not included in this category, and of course, illegitimate children were not included in this category. The reason why Caesar had requirements for the appearance was because of this. A good appearance could indirectly increase the credibility of his noble identity, which had a great impact on his plan. All right, according to your description, it should be like this. Luna handed the transformation necklace to him. Try it first. If it doesn't work, spit it out. We'll discuss and change it. The Black Dragon opened his mouth, and the little fellow stuffed the necklace in his mouth bit by bit. To be honest, Caesar was not confident at this time. The true dragons used magical items by relying on the elemental bloodline to resonate with the items in their stomach, so that they could use the effects of the magical items. However, this Black Dragon who was ignorant of magic did not have any elemental bloodline in his body. Let's try it. Caesar thought that if he had it, he had it. If he didn't, he didn't. There was no need to be nervous. In fact, if the transformation necklace did not work, he could also use the autonomous control unit to adjust his body, but that would be troublesome and risky. Once he did that, it would be too difficult to change back into a dragon. That would make him very worried. At the same time, the underground clans that followed him because of his identity as a true dragon were likely to scatter after that, and even Hog might run away. Caesar had full control of his body. At this time, he could feel that thing entering his stomach. Soon, a wonderful feeling of telepathy appeared in Caesar's mind. He knew that he had an additional ability. It worked. Pop. Just like the soft sound that Luna made when she changed her disguise, Caesar's originally strong and ferocious body quickly shrank and even disappeared, turning into the appearance of an ordinary human. Oh, Caesar, you look much better now. Luna's little eyes were shining as she kept circling around him. Forest fairies were also considered humanoid creatures, so their natural beauty was naturally inclined towards humanoid beauty, so much so that they had no feelings for true dragons. Even when Caesar's appearance changed greatly while he was in hibernation, the little fellow did not exclaim in admiration or praise, because in her eyes, all true dragons looked the same, and there was no difference apart from the color. But when Caesar turned into a human, it was different. Her treatment changed greatly, and the forest fairy Luna seemed to be very happy, circling around him and commenting, clicking her tongue in wonder. However, Caesar's attention was not on this. The first thing he paid attention to was the ability value that suddenly plummeted countless times in the assessment device. Scan analysis result. Carbon-based Life Comprehensive Combat Ability Assessment, 40/50. To be honest, this value is relatively high among humans, about the same as an elite warrior without the ability to cast spells, but to the Black Dragon, it was no different from a joke, equivalent to a collapse. After using the disguise state, his ability value decreased by 10 times. This was extremely unreasonable. He was not a true dragon that relied on magic to fight. No matter how the transformation necklace's pseudo-state was, Caesar's strength was not reduced or limited. So logically, there should not be such a situation where the value of his ability value plummeted. This made Caesar wonder if there was a problem with the assessment device. I'll try it with Hog later. He could not help but think. Chapter 131. Come attack me. In the lapis lazuli hall of the Emerald Palace, Caesar said to the Knoll leader Hog. Speaking of which, this was the first time he found this guy to be so intimidating. The knoll in front of him was astonishingly large. With a height of nearly 2.5 meters, all humans had to look up to him. His fangs were sharp, his muscles bulged, and the bristling mane on his back was like steel needles. He was completely different from ordinary gnolls. But, Your Majesty, because Caesar had already turned into a weak human disguise, Hog bent down as much as possible so that he would not look down on him. The gnoll was a little worried. Caesar's current appearance was a very ordinary human noble. He was harmless, thin, and weak, as if a gust of wind could blow him down. Hog was a little afraid that he would really hurt him. I told you to attack me, Hog. Although the Black Dragon Lord's voice had changed, it was still majestic. The Knoll leader smacked his lips. To be honest, he did not want to insist, but the pretense of declining and the necessary respect of a servant was still necessary. So after getting Caesar's approval, Hog waved his sharp claws. A whistling wind sounded. This guy's forelimbs were longer than ordinary gnolls, and his attack range was wider. His claws were as thick as a bear's and full of strength. However, this was only Hog's tentative attack, so Caesar easily dodged it. In human form, Caesar bent down and controlled his body, which was not very skilled. Instead of retreating, he moved forward and closed in. Then he kicked Hog's slightly bent knee. Of course, this was not Caesar's ultimate strength. His ultimate strength was estimated to be able to shatter Hog. In human disguise, Caesar could vaguely feel the existence of a limit. This was the highest strength he could exert within this limit. However, the results were not satisfactory. Hog did feel the pain in his knee, but the battle-hardened Jackalon leader was not affected at all. His body did not react at all, and he continued to attack. Caesar, on the other hand, was the first to be pushed back by the recoil. This was too weak, Caesar thought as he elbowed Hog's claws. This time, he began to use more strength than he could vaguely remember. Pop! A crisp and clear sound rang out. The hair on Hog's back instantly stood on end. His experience in the Colosseum and even in the wild made him instinctively feel danger. He immediately gave up on attacking and got down on all fours. He quickly retreated and ran far away. What headache! Caesar looked at his own claws and muttered. The 16 meters tall, strong black dragon instantly reappeared in the Emerald Palace. Fortunately, Hog had already escaped, otherwise he would have been badly injured. Caesar understood. His ability did not decrease or limit, but his disguise could not support and output such a powerful force. Once he exceeded that limit, his disguise would be forced to lose effect. No wonder the value in the verification device was only 40 or 50. So that's why. Fortunately, this thing was not a one-time use magic item. So in the fine magic light, Caesar returned to his human disguise. Attack me, Hog, he continued to say to the Jackalon leader. Hog panted and slowly walked back. The Jackalon had just burst out with the speed of survival, so it was still quite tiring. At this time, the clever Knoll had already guessed what the Black Dragon Lord wanted to do. It should be testing some kind of ability. In order not to annoy the Knoll, Hog didn't say anything. He nodded and attacked again. The whistling wind and sharp wolf claws approached for the second time. But this time, Caesar did not move. He did not even blink. In the next second, the wolf claws made contact with his body. In fact, at this time, Hog immediately reacted and subconsciously restrained his strength, but the sharp claws still cut through the human skin. Pop! And so, Hog fled again. Well, now it was even worse. He had been beaten back to his original form. The black dragon that reappeared smacked its lips and rubbed its chin with its hooked toes, clicking its tongue in wonder. He did not know if it was his problem or the transformation necklace, but this thing had too many restrictions. In the disguised state, Caesar could not fully exert his strength, nor could he let himself be hurt. The slightest mistake would cause him to explode on the spot. The only good thing was that Caesar did not need to rely on this disguise to do too much. In his plan, as long as he could go to the northern kingdoms, enter the khaki territory, and come into contact with the core members of the Brindle family, the disguise would be torn off, and the black dragon would show its fangs at that moment. It sounded simple, but it was not that easy to accomplish. The twists and turns, the difficulties and obstacles, Caesar could guess and anticipate in advance, even if he did not experience it himself. People like Roy were usually cautious, and now that they were at war with the Lion Kingdom, they were nervous to the extreme. At this time, the Brindle family would definitely be on guard against all assassinations, poisons, and any possible traps. The whereabouts of these people were probably kept a secret. Even their own soldiers would not be able to see them if they did not swear allegiance to them, not to mention people of unknown origins. Without enough information and channels, they probably did not even know where the Brindle family was. This was also the reason why Caesar disguised himself as a human noble. If it was someone else who did not have enough status, this matter would be even more difficult. He could not just tear off his disguise and start killing like a headless fly the moment he entered the khaki territory. That would be playing himself to death. Caesar returned to his disguised state. He felt that he needed to briefly learn the human noble etiquette so that he would not expose himself when the time came. Hog should know these things. Didn't the Knoll leader say that? His master, when he was young, was a noble, and it was time for him to prove it. Hog. Caesar was about to call the Knoll over, but he found that the Knoll was looking at him strangely. In fact, Hog had been looking at him strangely ever since he saw him this time. However, Caesar had been thinking about the transformation necklace at that time and did not take it to heart. Now, he finally noticed it. He did not ask Hog. His intuition told him that the problem was with his disguise, so Caesar found a mirror in the Emerald Palace and looked at himself. He immediately understood why Hog had that indescribable look in his eyes. Luna, I want a male, human noble, a male, a proper human, not a half-elf human noble who can't differentiate their gender. Chapter 132. Luna knew that she had made a mistake and did not dare to be mischievous anymore. She followed Caesar's request and began to change the camouflage template in the transformation necklace, adjusting it until the black dragon was satisfied. The matter regarding the transformation necklace came to an end for now. But in reality, due to the urgent research on the necklace, the black dragon had not finished browsing through all the magic items. In the green dragon's treasury, there were still some things that he had to pay attention to. Hey Caesar, look what I found. Using her mana as a rope, Luna struggled to drag a heavy weapon and shakily came in front of him. This is a real treasure. In this era where divine artifacts are not seen, it is a supreme treasure. Caesar heard her and looked over. At first glance, there was nothing special about the item. The material was ordinary, the color was dull, and there were even traces of rust in some places. It looked like an abandoned item from a long time ago. But in reality, it was a legendary treasure. The green dragon was very sneaky. He applied a layer of camouflage on it, covered its scent, and threw it in a corner of the treasury where no one cared about it. Then he sprinkled some dust on it, making it very easy for people to miss it. But with the forest fairies' innate sensitivity and wisdom, they finally found it. Magic item, Isaac thirst for blood. Such a treasure. Every one of them was unique and could not be replicated. It was a legendary item and even had its own spirituality. It could imprint its own history inside the item, allowing outsiders to see it. This axe was first used by one of the commanders of the Orc Empire, Isaac. Because of his charm, military talent, and pure nature of violent destruction, The ancient orc Isaac was blessed by the gods in the year 783 of the Second Era. He attracted the eye of Gush and led his bone-shattering tribe to glory. But because of his love for weapons and his desire for power, Isaac came up with a crazy plan. He tried to infuse the divine power of the eye of Gush into his axe, so that he could gain great power that he could control. He tried painstakingly, and the results told him that it was possible. However, the ancient orcs were betrayed in the process. In the end, Isaac was betrayed and killed. The crazy plan was ruined, and the entire bone-shattering tribe came to an end. However, his axe was still infused with divine power, and thus evolved and sublimated. Even now, it still thirsts for blood. Isaac thirsty blood. Caesar played with it in his claws. This was a heavy axe with a short handle. The edge of the blade was not neat and was serrated. To Caesar, it was as small as a toy. It was only a little bigger than the little girl Luna. However, the inside of it was filled with majestic power, so much so that Caesar could feel it. The forest fairies were experts on equal footing with true dragons when it came to identifying magical items, which was why Luna quickly understood its effects and began to explain it to the black dragon. As a legendary item, Thirsty Blood was much more powerful than the howl in the hands of the Black Knight Nagendro. Just the weapon alone had more than 3 characteristics: cut, measure strength, silent, and pain. Of course, these were only the most basic characteristics of the weapon. The user would be given the Dark Spell, Immobilization Spell, and Berserk Spell 3 times a day. Apart from that, Thirsty Blood itself had a unique and special intention: Fatal Despair. Although this was an effective spell of the hallucination type, its effect was equally powerful. It could almost be effective on all creatures below the legendary level. What would happen next would depend on the will of the caster. It would not be surprising if the caster went crazy or committed suicide. A legendary item, Luna exclaimed repeatedly. Caesar was also amazed. Both of them were country bumpkins who had never seen anything good. But Luna's excitement stemmed from her appreciation of the treasure, while the Black Dragon's was purely due to a sense of accomplishment and possessiveness. At this moment, under the gaze of Luna, the Black Dragon's throat made a gurgling sound. Soon, he vomited out the transformation necklace that he had swallowed. It sounded a little disgusting, but in reality, no one would refuse this process. In fact, they could not wait for a true dragon to do this, because it was probably the cleanest thing in the world. A magical item that went 1 round around the stomach of a true dragon, not to mention the dust on it. Even bacteria, viruses, and all other microorganisms would be wiped clean. Luna picked up the transformation necklace that the Black Dragon had vomited on the ground and watched as he swallowed the legendary weapon into his stomach. How would a true dragon use a weapon? It was very simple. Just like other magical items, after the elemental blood resonated with it, the weapon's characteristics would be attached to the true dragon's claws and fangs. Its additional spells would also appear in the true dragon's mind, allowing the true dragon to cast them easily. But Caesar could not. He did not feel it. In fact, he felt it, but it was not complete. The connection was weak. Of the 4 major weapon characteristics, only cut and measure strength appeared in his claws and fangs. As for the additional effective spells, Caesar could only cast Dark Sorcery. Immobilization and Berserk did not appear. As for Fatal Despair, he did not even know how to cast it. It was useless for him. Caesar finally understood that the transformation necklace was not rubbish. The problem was with him, but this guy was not angry or ashamed. For a true dragon who did not have elemental blood, he was already very happy to be able to use a magical item. Caesar did not ask for much. Ugh. Thinking about it, he vomited blood again. Originally, the Black Dragon was a little worried that the sharp saw blade of the legendary weapon would cut his throat and trachea. But in fact, it would not. God Io had already considered this when he made the rules. There was a complete set of detailed and complete basic rules. Caesar, you are really arrogant. You don't even care about a legendary item. Luna, like a little follower, helped him pick up the thing he vomited. She muttered and then asked seriously, "Is it not to your liking?" How can a legendary weapon not be to my liking? It's just that I can't use it. The black dragon shook his head sadly. He lowered his body and put his neck flat on the ground. His tail drooped and swayed unconsciously. After a pause, he asked, Luna, if this thing is not to be used, what do you think should be done with it? Of course, like the big green dragon, put it in the treasury and keep it. This is a treasure. A legendary creation is priceless. Countless races are scrambling for it. Little Luna was still staring at Isaac's blood. You can also build a crystal display in the palace, seal it, and admire it every day as a work of art. You will be happy to look at it every day. No. Caesar thought for a moment and refused to agree with the little girl's words. He looked at her with disdain and said righteously, You guys are the ones who ruined the culture of Eladia. At the same time, he had made a decision in his heart. He shouted to the wyvern that was on standby outside the Emerald Palace, Go and find the orc leader and the gnoll leader. Chapter 133. My lord, your majesty. Gaul and Hog appeared in front of him. It was worth mentioning that this was the third time the gnoll leader had been summoned today. Hog had to run back and forth between the tribe's habitat and the Emerald Palace 3 times. However, this guy was not impatient at all. He still arrived quickly and entered the Emerald Palace with the orc commander Gaul. Look at this. Caesar did not waste time. He held the legendary weapon with his tail claw and handed it to them. Whether it was Gaul or Hog, they were the first to join Caesar's forces. The orc and gnoll clans they led were also the core clans of the current Black Dragon army. Therefore, Caesar valued them very much. They were the foundation that he could rely on. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were his right-hand men. Hog and Gaul were indeed rare powerhouses in their own clans. However, as Caesar's bets expanded, their strength gradually became weaker. Whether it was the demon hound leader Nero, the black knight Nigendro, the skeletal dragon Angramo, or even the newly joined wyvern leader Husky, they were all stronger than them. To these clans, without strength, they had no confidence. Caesar's original plan was to lead the shapeshifters into the northern kingdoms and return after tearing apart Roy. However, that would take at least 2 weeks. He was prepared to leave Emerald City to Hog and Gaul for the time being. However, Black Dragon was worried that once he left, this place would be in chaos. This was not a baseless guess. It was an inevitable fact. The underground clans had just experienced the first 5-year plan. The newly recruited wyverns and thorn beasts were also chaotic clans. It was their nature. It was likely that even if Black Dragon only left for 3 days, this place would be in chaos. Without strength, Hog and Gaul would have a hard time stabilizing the situation. They could not go to the Underdark and summon the undead to suppress them, could they? Therefore, in order to give them more confidence, Caesar decided to bestow the legendary weapon he had no use for, Isaac Bloodlust, to his 2 loyal family members to see which one of them was more suitable for the job. My lord, this is... Gaul took the treasure and held it in both hands. He wanted to ask the Black Dragon Lord about the origin of the treasure, but after seeing its full appearance, the orc stopped talking. The origin of Isaac's thirst for blood was related to the orcs. Gaul could even see through it. His pupils were immersed in that history, as if he could see the past. After a while, the orc commander came back to his senses. He gripped his short battle axe tightly with both hands, his chest heaving up and down violently. After a while, he said to the Black Dragon Lord, My lord, it records the past glory and filth of the ancient orc empire. Can you use it? Yes. Gaul nodded. He took 2 steps forward and knelt down again. He held the legendary heavy axe with both hands and handed it back to the Black Dragon. But I beg you to take back this treasure. This is not something that the orcs should use. Why? Because it has the blood of our clansmen on it. Gaul bared his teeth and said with bulging eyes, This belongs to the traitor. The orc commander Isaac was a rat nailed to the pillar of shame. He was the one who destroyed the Eye of Gush. The reason why the ancient orc empire fell apart was because of 2 betrayals, the Broken Bone tribe and the Giant tribe. The Broken Bone tribe destroyed our divine item, While the giant tribe betrayed us in the War of the Setting Sun, this is a hatred that every orc must remember. Even if we are skinned alive and cursed for eternity, we will never forget. Gaul let out an uncontrollable roar. Caesar listened quietly. Of course, he was not interested in learning about the history of the ancient Orc Empire, nor was he interested in digging up old scores. But out of respect, Caesar waited for Gaul to finish speaking before taking back the blood of thirst. In his opinion, the orcs were a little too stupid. Their bottom line was a little too high. They weren't even willing to use the enemy's weapon. Was the name of a traitor really that important? After all, this was a legendary weapon. But after thinking about it, Caesar understood. He did not understand the story of the orcs, nor did he experience that history. Naturally, he could not empathize with their feelings. Understand. The Black Dragon, who had always been understanding, couldn't help but feel a heavy heart at this moment. He was led astray by the orc Garland, and used his tail to pass the legendary weapon back to Hogg, saying with a cold face, "Here, Your Majesty, this." Hogg was stunned. He had heard Gaul's words. He had thought that he had nothing to do with it. But the Black Dragon made an unexpected decision. "You want to reward it to me?" "Yes, you have done well." With the Black Dragon Lord's affirmation, Hogg dared to slowly take the weapon. He was not an idiot who did not know what was good for him. As a knowledgeable gnoll, he knew the value of Isaac's blood of thirst. Such a treasure could buy 10 large clans of gnomes, half of a fertile city, or 3 elite armies. It could also be exchanged for the chastity of a silver dragon. In the eyes of dragons, silver dragons were the most beautiful, true dragons. Such a treasure, and the Black Dragon Lord had given it to him. Hogg was overwhelmed with emotions. His eyes were filled with disbelief. If it were not for the fact that gnolls did not have tears, and that his personality was limited, he would probably have burst into tears. But even so, this huge and strong gnoll lowered his head, his body trembling slightly. Speaking of which, after escaping from the hands of humans, Hogg also had a certain amount of ambition. He also desired power and strength. He wanted to gather and build his forces, take over a mountain, and become a lord. However, as a greedy, cruel, dirty, and despicable gnoll, no other race was willing to follow Hogg. Moreover, during his exile in the wilderness, he had seen too many races that were stronger than the gnolls. The cruel reality beat him until he bent over. Hogg found that with the identity of a gnoll, he could not become a so-called lord at all. The power that he thought was strong was gradually shattered in one battle after another. In order to survive, he even knelt down and begged for mercy from the grizzly bears. Later, Hogg gave up. He hoped to just eat and wait for death. It did not matter who he followed, and he could barely live out the rest of his life. Even in that illusory dream, he never thought that one day he would be able to obtain a legendary treasure. Hogg was silent for a long time. After a long time, he slowly raised his head and looked directly at Caesar. Then he opened his mouth, stuffed his claws into it, and pulled out a sharp and small fong from the innermost part of his mouth. "Your Majesty." Hogg handed the fong to the Black Dragon and repeated the words they said when they first met. "As long as you are willing, the fearless gnoll will be the sharpest guillotine in your hand." True dragons were all stingy people. In all these years, Eladia had never heard of a true dragon who would give such a precious treasure to his subordinates. Hogg was well aware of the value of this gift. "Help me guard this acre of land. When I return, I want to see everything in Green Capital in order better than when I left." I promise you that you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.